2025 Committee of the Whole meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. We did not have a need for an executive session prior to this meeting. So with that, if everyone would rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call for attendance when you're ready, Mr. Mummert.
Mrs. Bauer.
Here.
Mr. Beard.
Here.
Mrs. Brennan.
Here.
Mr. Galzella.
Here.
Mr. Gelsinger.
Here.
Mr. Leidy. Mr. Plessick. Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Weaver.
Here.
7 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. Mr. Plessick did let me know that he would be absent ahead of time, as did Mr. Leidy, who is attending his children's choir concerts this evening. Okay, number 5, recognition of visitors. We have a presentation on VLN.
I don't know if you want me to put me after. You want them to go first? I'm here to go first. It's up to you. It doesn't matter to me.
Does the board have a preference either way?
I'd rather see you on first.
Okay, then there, okay. Well, welcome, Dr. Seibel.
So thank you for letting me come and present some information to you this evening. I didn't say anything ahead of time just because tonight's is a presentation. I believe there's going to be discussion next board meeting, possibly talk more about it. VLN is an online platform. Right now, we use Lincoln Edge. If you're not familiar with Lincoln Edge, it is through the IU. We have about 90 students that attend Lincoln Edge. We go through the IU as a middleman. They use Imagine Learning for their platform. So after being the district liaison for a couple years, kind of looking at the program, figuring out what's best for our students, educationally for the kids, and then also cost-wise. So I worked with another colleague of mine in another district to look at cost. Could we do something better for our kids? And so VLN is sort of what we landed on. We looked at Imagine Learning. We looked at Keola, which is through Capital Area Intermediate Unit. So we did a lot of investigations from the beginning of the year to see what would be the best platform. And VLN seems to offer some things that we don't get right now with Lincoln Edge, in addition to other programs didn't offer what this program can offer. So I'm going to show you the presentation. Maybe. There we go. So VLN is part of Harris School Solutions. This is a larger company overview, just so you know that it doesn't exist by itself. So Harris bought them out recently. They have $4 billion in their revenues. They've been in the market for 45 years. The online program they've been doing for 16 years. I think Dr. Burkhart can attest to, I guess, years ago, VLN was kind of presented to him in another district that he worked at. So they've been in the business for quite a while. Their vision is to look at district-controlled alternative to virtual cyber schools. Again, so this will be our own cyber program. Instead of having kids go to CCA or outside cyber schools, we're trying to get kids to stay with us because it keeps the cost down. So they're looking for an alternative education program outside. We try to get them to go to our own cyber program. They provide live one-on-one instructional support. The assessments are graded by live teachers, which is something that doesn't necessarily always happen. Sometimes other programs, it's computer-based grading. They provide daily synchronous classes, which is a huge thing. Right now, Lincoln Edge is only asynchronous. So a lot of programs out there for online learning are only asynchronous. This program allows for some synchronous learning, which is great because they get a face-to-face teacher. It is K-10 only, and I kind of looked into that a little bit to find out why they only offer K-10. VLN had shared in past, they offered it for 11th and 12th graders. They found that those kids didn't take advantage of those online face-to-face interactions as much as the K-10 kids did. So that's why it's K-10. The program is still available for K-12. They have a scalable academic rigor. So I'll show you later, they have 7 levels of rigor, and they have world-class support. So that's sort of the vision of VLN, which stands for Virtual Learning Network, in case you're wondering. So what makes VLN different than Lincoln Edge? There's a few things. There's the ability to customize any course. They match the scope and sequence of classroom instruction and enables easy transition between classroom and remote learning. So let's get a little deeper into what's different. So academic rigor. So you can see here through VLN, they offer different levels of academic rigor. Right now, currently with Lincoln Edge, they only offer one level of rigor. There's no different levels. So when you look at this for foundations, grades 4 through 12, sort of would be kids who have IEPs or 504 plans or need more academic assistance. You can see in that level, they take away short answers or essays. They make it a little easier to still get the classes they need to graduate. However, it makes it a little easier for those kids who have IEPs. General education track, you can see that there. They take out the essay, vocabulary. General education is more for students who might not be academic college bound. And then the academic is more for the college bound students. Of course, kids could be put in any of those tracks based on their intake meeting they would have with us. The counselor would help decide that track for those kids. They also offer credit recovery, which we currently do now with OWARE at the middle school and high school, right more at the high school for credit recovery. But this could be replaced the OWARE that we use currently at the high school. They offer 20 advanced placement courses and 27 honors courses. And then elementary K through 3, you'll see they don't have those different levels of rigor. However, they do offer just what the younger learners need, the one track. There is the VLN Essentials course catalog. I did not share this ahead of time, but after this presentation, I will email everyone. The catalog is pretty lengthy. I didn't want to kill a forest. So I'll email it to you. But it does list all the courses that are available through VLN and gives a description for each course that's offered through them. When it says there's 500,000 curated learning objectives, that just means all the things they pull together to create the courses. It could be online videos, it could be lectures, it could be resources, numerous things they pull from Khan Academy. They pull everything together to create the courses. So they have about 500,000 curated learning objectives. You can see there they offer national exam test prep, extensive CT offerings, several different things. Again, I'll send you the catalog. You can be able to look through that. So program support. With this program, they offer unlimited access to dedicated account manager. So there's an account manager in our region that is assigned to our school that we can meet with and discuss and work through the program together. That is assigned to us. There's monthly meetings to assess student achievement and curriculum needs. We currently do that now with Lincoln Edge. We meet once a month. That will continue with this program. There's quarterly meetings to assess program metrics and cost savings, tech support that they offer for all students and administrators, and advanced cybersecurity. Here's an example of a weekly report that is sent, it's emailed to the student, the parents, administrators, teachers, whoever needs it. It'll show, as you can see, there's a student named Vivian Virtual up there, a ninth grader. It'll show what courses she's taking, and then it shows you this green, red, or yellow. On the side there, it shows if they're failing, if they're in danger of failing, or if they're passing. And then it will show you the number of missing assignments they had for the week, along with what grades they got on the submitted work, and what their current grade is if they missed work. So this is a weekly report that gets sent. Right now, Lincoln Edge does not do that. Parents have to log in to what's called Genius, which is their platform, find the information, look it all up, do it all on their own. This will actually go right to a parent's email inbox, which I think is fantastic for weekly progress. In addition to this, it'll get more detailed. It'll show the missing assignments that are missing, exactly what's missing. It'll give incorrect submissions, past due, and then additional comments from their teachers or people that are watching them. So lots of information weekly coming to the parents right to their inbox. So they don't have to go search for it. They get it right away on how their kid's doing. Yep. Yes. Yep. Yep. What, Mr. Bummer? All right. So live teacher support. There's subject level support. Live student teacher interaction throughout the day. They all their teachers have office hours in the morning and afternoon that kids can log into to get one-on-one with their teachers. They do bi-weekly one-on-ones, which means they meet with students one-on-one, go over how they're progressing, how they're doing on a bi-weekly basis. There's daily live math guided practice for higher level courses. Currently right now, again, that's the synchronous learning that we don't offer. Kids have to do everything asynchronous. There's daily writing and math labs with teachers, and there's a resource room for special education students. So again, a lot more synchronous live teacher support that we do not have currently, which I think is fantastic that this program offers that. When we look at other programs like Hayola and Imagine Learning, this is not a piece they offer. They do not offer synchronous learning, which I think for these kids that are learning at home, it's great to have that teacher connect. Besides the office hours, they offer a lot more. This details that live instruction that they offer. K-3 elementary live lessons, they do math and English. They do 2 30-minute sessions per week for each reading and math. 4th, 6th does the same thing, 2 30-minute sessions. And then 7 through 12 does a guided practice, 30 minutes. So again, live, meeting with a teacher, logging on, watching the lesson, learning from a teacher. So authentic assessments, again, they're looking at some online learning platforms don't do essays because they have to be teacher graded, right? They're not computer generated, always graded. They will do essays where they are teacher graded. They do large test banks, so if they have to do a follow-up, they can redo a test with teacher approval. And they identify areas for targeted instruction. So they have live teachers, they have a 72-hour time frame to get the work graded and back to the students. This is what the page looks like, landing page when a kid logs on. They actually customize it for our district. So it won't say VLN, it'll say Southwestern School District Virtual Academy, or however we want to word that, and it'll have our logo. So it looks like it's our online learning program, it's not VLN. You can see here, it has a student orientation page. So when a student signs up, they go through that process to learn how to use the program. On the left side there, there's a green, I don't know, visual that shows how much progress they've completed for the week. And then their courses are there listed in blocks. You can see there's a student get help from a teacher up there in the left corner. That'll have office hours. They can get a live person to help them. All kinds of things in this dashboard. Once they log into one of the courses, for example, this is a high school US History 2 course. It's broken down by modules. You can see there are module 1 through 11 there. So a module is basically a week's work of work. So we can decide as a school district when we want to open it up and when we want the deadline to be. So if we want it to be 1 week, it could open up a Sunday, close on next Sunday at midnight. And they have to finish that module by that time. We could do 2 weeks. It's up to our district what we decide to do. They said most people do 1 week and then close it. Currently, right now, Lincoln Edge does not have a module like that. You work at your own pace and you try to keep up with the work, and they can complete the work in 2 weeks if they want, which is not good feedback. Kids just rush through it. They try to get it done. This actually paces the kid through it to help them understand pacing. And if I have I think it's awesome because my kid's in college. He's online college with Penn State, and he has the same sort of model. His assignments open Sunday night, midnight. He has to do it by next Sunday midnight. So it's getting them ready and preparing them for if they do online college work.
So
I think it's
on that
fantastic.
topic,
Yep.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be one of my questions. But Lincoln Edge, from what I've heard, some of our students are actually completing classes in 5 days. Then they're not logging in, and all of a sudden they're receiving truancy letters because they're not in school, but all of their work is complete. So is that concept going to prevent that?
Yes,
from
this will pace
happening?
it for them. Yep. They'll have one module at a time opening it up. I would say most kids in Lincoln Edge are on pace. Some of them work ahead. But the attendance is based on if they're on pace or if they miss days. That's how we would have to figure out as a district how we want to do our attendance with this program. Dover Area School District uses this program currently. I looked at their model, how they do attendance. It's about keeping a grade and on pace. So I looked at Hanover School District also uses this VLN as well in our area. So there's a couple of districts that already currently use this program. So when you click on a module, you can go into the module. You can see that it's broken down by an overview, instructional materials, and portfolio assessment. They're required to at least do 2 of the instructional materials. They can do more, obviously, but they can't just skip over and go right to the assessment and short answer and do that stuff without doing any of the lessons. It requires them to at least do 2 of the lessons out of the number that are there. Right now, that's not happening. Lincoln Edge, they can just jump right to whatever. There's no pacing in Lincoln Edge. Student can also then see their progress of what they submitted, how it's graded. On the last part there, it has comments. Sometimes teachers can not just leave written comments, but they can use a verbal comment to a student, which does not happen now. So a teacher doesn't want to do written, they can leave a verbal comment, which is kind of nice for a student and their schoolwork. I already showed that. So let's look at numbers. Okay, so top part, Edge, 23, 24. Student numbers, there are 84 to about 91 students. So, average number of students there. Total cost last year was $647,573 to the exact dollar. That's what we paid last year for Lincoln Edge. Moving to the right side, you can see where we're at with the number of students and the cost. This month, I think it was $71,000 for the cost, and we're at 95 students. It's not up there because I just got it today. So We're going to be spending more this year than last year. As you can see, what's interesting is we had 84 students in September. We have 74 students this year, and it's more money. You can see the costs go up every year for Lincoln Edge. Yep. Yeah, so January is interesting, right? So January for Lincoln Edge is a crossover for the semester. What happens is with Lincoln Edge, here a little history with Lincoln Edge, a kid gets approved to go to Lincoln Edge the last day of the month, we have to pay for the entire month, even though they were one day in that school or in that Lincoln Edge. So if I would approve an application last week at the end of the week, at the end of the month, we have to pay for the entire month, even though the kid was only there for 2 days. Early withdrawal. We had early graduates, a lot of early graduates leaving, and then we had new kids coming in. So we're paying for, we're paying for all the early graduates that left us January 14th or 15th, and then we're paying for all the new kids coming in January 15th. So that's why that is a larger number every month, because we pay for the entire month, no matter when they come and go. They're one day for that month. Yep. So this will actually solve that problem too. We probably won't be having that issue where we're paying for an entire month for a student to go somewhere if they're only there for a day. I've been doing my due diligence. So if a kid applied last week, I didn't approve them to this week, so I didn't have to pay for February, because I'm trying to make sure we don't pay for a whole month for 2 days, because I think that's ridiculous. So down below is VLN costs. You can see that I just averaged 83 students. It could be a little more than that at 5 classes a semester, and actually they really take 4 classes a semester. So I'm averaging more than probably I should. However, when you look at it, it's $195 class per semester. And so when you figure out the numbers for the entire year for 83 students with 5 classes each semester, you're looking at $192,163 for the entire year for the same number of kids. It's a major savings, right? It's class per class. It's 195 per class. So for instance, right now I'm averaging 5 classes a semester. Typically, most kids will take 4 classes a semester, right? So I'm a little high with the number, actually. If I went a little, but if we have 95 kids now, the tricky part is you don't know how many kids are actually going to be there. So if the 95 kids were there, so it's about right, that number, 192, 163. That would also include the monthly meetings with the account management staff with VLN, includes the weekly emailed progress reports to parents, students, and district we talked about. If a student submits less than, say a kid goes there and they don't like it, but if they had not submitted 20 assignments yet, we can actually transfer that course for $55 to another kid. So we don't lose any money because the kid went there and said, I don't like this. So we can transfer $55. Again, it includes the levels of rigor, which we don't currently have. They also, in their contract, would help us market. One time they create all the marketing materials to try to get some students back from the outside cyber schools, from CCA, from all the other cyber schools, because right now we spend over $3 million, I heard, for outside charter schools. If we can get some of those kids to come back to our district, yes, it will cost us money, but it's going to cost a lot less for us to have them here than going outside. So again, they will help us market that once a year, which I think we should do, because we can get some. I have a family who I'm friends with who homeschool their children, and when I spent some time this past weekend or 2 weekends ago with them, they had no idea we had our own program. They go to a homeschool group, and the homeschool group's like, CCA. I'm like, no, we have our own program. And they were like, what? So I explained to them, but there's no communication out there to those home groups that we actually offer something. So I think this will help us start communicating that and get some of these families back and save a lot of money. So, okay, moving on. So with that though, so it was very cheap, right? $190-some thousand. I guess not cheap, but less than what we're paying. Current staffing costs at Lincoln Edge. So just a little bit of brainstorming we did as a central office team and some other people. Right now, bringing it back does incur some more things on us, right? Right now, they go to Lincoln Edge. Lincoln Edge has counselors, special education advisor, administrator, secretary. So when we approve a kid to go to Lincoln Edge, we help with the enrollment and say, yes, they can go there. And then once they go there, Lincoln Edge does all the other stuff. They do everything at Lincoln Edge. So bringing them back will put more responsibilities on our district staff, as far as figuring out what classes they need to take, Act 158, how to help them graduate, making sure the attendance. There's lots of things we have to monitor with 100 kids going. So if we do bring it back, there is a suggestion of hiring some other staff to help with that. But again, I will show you in a minute what we budgeted for next year, and you're going to see that we still save money. But however, these are, again, being proposed. That we do a supervisor of virtual learning. Again, the idea that this person would help with the virtual learning, but probably have other duties as assigned. I would also think this person would be responsible for trying to get some of those kids back from those other charter schools, trying to save us some money, communicating to families, helping advertise, helping do a lot more than just supervising these students. But then also could be help with behavior at a school. I don't know. Other duties assigned. I'm not sure what that looks like because there's no job description yet. Again, these are proposed. Learning support, that's what the cost is in Master Step 1. Because we have about 15 kids there now. Obviously, it's not a huge caseload. But however, we would be responsible for writing the IEPs, progress monitoring. All those things happen now at Lincoln Edge. But now if we bring it back to us, we would be responsible for writing the IEPs, doing the progress monitoring, making sure those kids are making progress, going to the meetings. However, if we hired a person in that position, they would have to do other things besides just that caseload. We talked about they could be blended, right? We talked about some of those kids that need the extra support, that are learning support, could come in for lessons with that person here at the school and also do virtual. So there's all kinds of things we can talk about how we can use that person. The guidance counselor, again, would be the one that would help figure out what courses they need to take, make sure they get the right courses to graduate, make sure they have Act 158, make sure they get their career standards because they have career standards we have to do that we have to report to the state. So again, they would have duties with the online learning, but in addition, we would figure out what other duties they could do in the district to help support other things in the district. Maybe that learning support person or guidance counselor in that position helps take on some of the load with some of our kids who need some of those one-on-one guidance stuff at the high school. I don't know. We haven't really talked about what we could do, but we would definitely figure out what else we could do with them. So, overview of the budget. So you can see next year budget for 25-26 in the current budget is $710,165 for Lincoln Edge. That was all Lincoln Edge going to them. So estimated VLN cost, which I showed you, was $192,163. Estimated 3 staffing, again, proposed, is $391,059. And then the estimated total cost for VLN would be $583,222. Even with hiring 3 other staff positions, if that's what we do, and going with VLN, we're still going to save $126,943 for the district. Yes.
And that savings is only for, with the expectation that those 3 positions could feasibly be in buildings within the district and be running extra duties where we need them.
Correct.
So
Yep.
almost dual jobs.
Correct.
Not, but
Yeah,
almost.
their main priority, their job would be the virtual learning program. And obviously, only have 100 kids there, so yes, you're going to have other duties as assigned. Correct. Hopefully, by bringing some of those positions and people focusing on that, we can bring other people back and grow that program and save money from kids leaving to go to CCA or their outside charter schools, because we have, I mean, $3 million outside charters is a lot of money if we can get those kids to realize we have a really good program here. Because the difference with that is when the parents ask me, I'm like, well, if you go to our program, you get to graduate with our diploma. You get to go to all of our activities. You can still be in our sports program. You're a Southwest student. If you go to CCA, you don't get any of those things. You're no longer our student. You've been withdrawn, and you don't get a Southwest diploma. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to going to an online program if we get the word out. This is why it's important to go to our program, and we offer the same supports that you would get at a CCA.
You said that a couple local school districts are doing this already. I don't know if you've had conversations with them, but have they found if you have they found with the institution of something like this that they are seeing some of those charter school kids come back?
Yeah, I have not had that specific conversation with them.
That's totally fine.
Yep.
Are you envisioning all 3 of those positions being on the CBA, or is one of them going to be Act 93?
I will refer to Dr. Burkhart.
CBA. All 3. Is there a potential to possibly pick up another administrator out of this? If we took that supervisory position and made it on the Act 93 to get some help at the high school level or middle school level if we needed it?
The supervisor position was based off an elementary assistant principal position, but I don't know what that means.
And we might have to go behind closed doors to talk too much about this. So.
We have an idea for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only other question, since I got the mic, you said about asynchronous and synchronous. Can the school direct a child to be synchronous compared to asynchronous? I'm just thinking about some of the examples of where we direct certain students to Lincoln Edge that may not do well online. Can the board, with the administration's recommendation, direct them to go one direction or the other?
So yeah, I think if you have a counselor or somebody to talk, yes, you can sign them up for a guided algebra class instead of the other algebra class. And the guide would offer those 2 synchronous lessons a week. There's also a daily homeroom that happens with the cost. I don't know if I pointed that out back here somewhere. If you look at the daily homeroom here, is for 30 students is 25,313. That's for 20. It's only for 30 students, but it's a daily homeroom. Typically, it's used for K-3 younger learners. They have to get on every day, do attendance, and do a lesson, meet with the teacher, talk about the upcoming week's assignments. However, when we had our meetings with VLN and the contract, which you don't have, but in the contract they wrote up for us, they included that we could pick any students to put in there. So if we have a kid who is struggling, which we have many, that go to Lincoln Edge sometimes and aren't keeping up with the pace of their work and are not getting on at all and failing, we could assign them to a homeroom and say, you're going to go every day. Now, could the kid just skip homeroom? Sure, because we can't, I'm not the house to twist their arm to get on. However, we could sign them up for these things and say, you need to go to these. Again, same thing with the 30-minute lessons. Could they not go? Sure, but then they're going to wind up failing and not doing that. But yes, to answer your question, we could make sure those kids get those extra synchronous help that they can't do now.
So this is an excellent presentation. I appreciate the way out and the explanation of the costs. My concern is in the special education arena. Have you conferred with our special education directors to see what we're taking on as far as IEPs and assessments? And I mean, that's a heavy lift financially.
Yep, good question. So I did talk to Ms. Cortina. Ms. Cortina's on board with this. She thinks it's a great idea. Right now we do all the evaluations for those kids. So if a kid needs evaluated, we have to take Lincoln Edge kids and evaluate them. So that's no difference between the programs. The only thing that's different is when we bring a kid back, and actually Ms. Cortina and some of our people already still attend the IEP meetings those kids have because they're still considered our Southwest students. So that doesn't even increase that load a whole lot. So the only thing that would be writing the IEPs would now be our responsibility because right now Tim Marks is at Lincoln Edge and he does the IEP writing for the kids. And he also does the progress monitoring. So more of that would be our pieces that we bring back. And it's not really a heavy lift. There's only 15 kids there right now that are IEP kids. So that's why we're offering the learning support teacher, but also that would have additional duties. So would help with that. Good question. Anything else? Sure.
When you were checking out Hanover and Dover, did they give you any kind of data as far as success rates, failure rates, anything like that?
No, I really just asked about the program if they thought it was a good program, and I got good responses from them, both saying the program is excellent. And Northeastern just actually went with them as well,
Oh.
2 months ago. So,
Yeah.
Okay, a little background. I was working with a person that worked at Lincoln Edge as their supervisor, who left Lincoln Edge, is a district now. We worked together on looking at different programs. So he was very knowledgeable about the online part since he actually ran Lincoln Edge for a whole year.
Yeah, I was scrolling.
But yes, I do think it's a good program.
I was scrolling the 350 plus courses as you were going through, and I was happy to see real world math applications and CTE practical math and other ones like that. So it was nice to see that pop up as far as helping with trades and stuff like that. In
Yeah,
the
they
real
offer
world.
some CTE.
And budgeting and checks and all that fun stuff. So it was nice to see they have a lot of programs like that as well.
Thank you. Andy.
So with Lincoln Edge currently, in my mind, there's a couple ways to get to Lincoln Edge, right? You as a family can elect Lincoln Edge for your children if you
Mhm.
do not want them to be in a Southwestern school. Or the board has an option, if necessary, to use that as a form of discipline.
Sure.
To send a child. In the event when we have families that elect to use it, are they signing up for just one semester? Are they signing up for a whole year? Do we allow the children to jump in and out? How does that, I've not experienced the Lincoln Edge process, so
Yeah.
how exactly does that work?
It's a good question. So last year, I will tell you that it was very open and enrolling, right? Kids went in and out constantly last year. Lincoln Edge changed their process and their program for this year. If any kid went after a certain date, they charge us more money. So I went to Dr. Burkhart before this year started, and I said, we need to now have deadlines because I'm not going to pay more money because we sent a kid later. So we set deadlines this year. So that it was open enrollment in the beginning of school year before school started, opened again in January to like February 1st. Now, are there situations like when the board makes a decision for a student that goes there? Obviously, we send them there because it's not closed to us to send a kid there. We chose to close it because of the fact that they're going to charge us more money at a certain date. So this year, I would say yes, we had deadlines. Beginning of the year, middle of the year, semester changes.
I mean, it makes logical sense because you don't want to get behind or have the courses you take online not line up with the courses necessarily that you'd be taking in a building, but I just wasn't sure what our process was.
Correct. And we do still have some kids that, there's a certain reason they have to go there and we make a decision administratively to say, oh my gosh, we need to make a decision and they send them there. And then counselors work with the courses they were taking and see how they match the courses there just so they can kind of work on that piece to make sure they're not falling behind by starting all over a new class. So.
So one of the main points of information I have would be related to in thinking about should this happen and there's a transitionary period, what's the timeline that you believe it would take considering the number of children that we have and with the deadlines that you just stated as far as Lincoln Edge are concerned, what would we be looking at? Like 6 months or something?
So no, hopefully a lot faster. But so hopefully with the board's approval, hopefully we'd have approval by the end of this month, last board meeting, hopefully to see if we can move this direction. The only reason I say that is because Lincoln Edge will soon start advertising to our families to re-enroll there at Lincoln Edge. And if we choose not to use Lincoln Edge, we need our families not to re-enroll there. So hopefully we can move it along faster. This program has onboarding, so they will meet with anybody who is running this program. They have the managers that will meet with us, help us onboard, help us figure out the application process. They're ready. Like as soon as we say yes, that company is ready to support us and bring their people alongside us to help us create it and get it up and running and moving. They'll do the orientation like next August or September when we decide to start the program. They'll come and do a whole orientation for all of our families on how to use the program, how to do the program. They'll do live sessions. So they are very in my opinion, what they have shared, their onboarding process and getting things up and running for a district are very smooth. So I would think working with them, we could get it up and running in less time than that, but by next year for the,
So thank you for that. And follow-up question, from a support perspective, what's the timeline we'd be looking at for creating the job descriptions, seeking people to fill those roles, and do they have to be in place before we could place students in here?
So I do know that Dr. Frio has set up some meetings to start doing the job descriptions already. However, again, with the proposed, the board would have to make that decision as well. But we were going to meet, I think, very soon to start crafting those job descriptions.
You said Friday.
I couldn't remember it. It was soon. Okay, Friday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My question was very similar to that. So we are looking at starting this at the end of August, so for next school year?
I think that
'Cause
would
that
be,
would be a rush this year, right?
yeah, I think this year we're kind of locked in. I think it would be too much to get this year, but I think it's reasonable to get it in place by next school year.
Okay, because that's about 6 months from right now.
Yep.
So that's still might be a timeline.
Yeah,
A
I
little
think
tight for hiring and all that fun stuff. So I know. you
it's
said-
possible to probably run the program until we get that stuff. I'm assuming we could probably figure it out. Yeah.
Positions filled.
Special education might be hard, but may have internal interest too.
Mhm.
Because if it's part of our CBA, obviously we'll post it. And if internal candidates come, we'll have to consider them as well. But I feel fairly confident we could, it'll be an aggressive advertisement and I know they'll get the job descriptions done rather quickly. So I don't anticipate that being an issue.
Anyone else?
I just like to thank Dr. Seibel for this because this truly was his brainchild. He came to us with this idea. He showed the savings. He did all the legwork. So not only is he bringing back what I consider to be a better program, the added bonuses, you can see there's significant savings for the district, which will compound itself year after year. And hopefully we'll attract some more of our students back because there are additional benefits to being a member of VLN or Southwestern Virtual Academy because they will be our students and can participate in all of our events. So thank you, Dr. Seibel.
Very good. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
I'm going to be leaving, by the way.
Okay.
That's why you want to go first.
Yeah. He wanted to go second. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. This moves us on to number 6, which is a financial presentation, PFM Financial Advisors LLC. First.
Yes, we have Brad Remming here from PFM, and we have Jay Wenger and also Mike Lillis from RBC here to talk about the need to borrow $14 million for our high school project, to finish the high school project. So with that, I'll let Brad start.
Great. Good evening. Good to see everybody. I think before you, there's probably a handout. Looks a little bit like this that I'll kind of guide the conversation with and go through. Kind of want to walk you through the steps That's what we need to do to finish funding the high school project. So there's page numbers on the bottom right-hand side. Page number 1 is a colorful interest rate chart. This is something every financial advisor needs to have a colorful chart to talk about the market. Because when we borrow funds for a capital project at a school district, we issue what's called municipal bonds. Okay, so we have a market that we track, and Mike and Jay track as well. And we talk a little bit about what the interest rates are on those, because one of the things, as you may be aware, as a school district in Pennsylvania, if you borrow funds for a capital project, you can borrow them on a tax exempt basis. That means the ultimate owners of the bonds don't have to pay federal taxes on them. So that means they will accept a lower interest rate since they don't have to pay taxes on the income. That's a good thing for us. So anyway, these charts are basically for our index that we track, much less like the Dow Jones things in stocks. The DVAL is what we call it, is the index for municipal bonds. If you look at the chart on the top, I don't know if you're familiar with this, or if you're familiar with the yield curve concept, but basically on a yield curve, what you do is graft a 1-year rate, a 2-year rate, a 5-year, all across the way, and then you draw a line. Okay, so that's what's called the yield curve in the municipal market on the top. The gray bars, okay, are the highs and the lows for the last 30 or so years, since 1993. The red line is the historic averages, and the blue line is where we are today. So you'll notice the blue line, especially as we get towards the right, is a little bit below historic averages. I'm not sure everybody realizes how well the municipal bond market's functioning. You hear about mortgage rates being at 6-7% and all these things, but we're still at or just below historic averages for municipal bond rates. So that's kind of a good thing I wanted the board to be aware of. What we do on the bottom charts is we actually take the 10-year rate and we graph it over time. You'll notice in the middle one, there's a legend with a blue line, a red line, and a green line. If you look at the blue line, the 10-year rate has been at this, has only been lower than this 43% of the time, 42% of the time. It's been higher over 57% of the time. Again, just wanted to give the board some, idea of what the market's doing if you move forward with this next financing. The next page number 3, this gives you an idea of what your payments are for debt you already have. Okay, some of the ones have payment periods that are longer than others, because some of those bonds on the left that were issued earlier, you've paid down more over time. The two on the right in column 6 and 7 are the first 2 bonds that were done for the high school project, one in 2022, and there was another one in 2023. And I'll go over that in just a second. But those are the payments. And I also want to make sure the board knows that's principal and interest, okay, payments for your existing debt. If you look at the bottom of the page, it's a little bit different. It's what we call local effort. And what that means is for one of your bonds that's outstanding back from 2018, that had been qualified for PlanCon reimbursement. Okay, that's gone now. As you know, it's in moratorium. But for those bonds that were issued while it was still in place, you're still getting reimbursement on that. And Jeff or Doug, when they make the payment, submit a Form TD and get your reimbursement. We like to make sure we focus on that because if you think about it this way, once you get rid of an expense, the payment on the bond, and it goes away, you lose the revenue from PlanCon. So we like to track it that way to make sure we say, okay, we know we're going to lose the expense, but also we're losing the revenue. So we like to make sure we keep track of that as well. So that's why the bottom is just slightly lower than the stuff on the top. Also on this page, you'll notice the second to last line, it says call date. Those are the dates at which the bonds are eligible to be refinanced. Okay. You can usually it takes somewhere between 5 and 8 years, depending on the market and the size of the issue, before you can refinance. One of our jobs here sitting before you is to pick up the phone and let the district know if there's any opportunity to refinance and save money. Right now, we're not in that spot, okay, because some of the bonds that we issued back in the late 2018s, 2019, and for the high school project, the rates are still a little bit locked in lower than what we could get today. Because if you do a refinancing, their costs, And we want to make sure that even if you have to pay some of those closing costs, there's a way to reduce your payment or get some savings. We've been tracking that and we'll keep the district informed as to when that becomes a possibility. We hope it is at some point. People like to save money. But if you look at this chart, one thing I'm sure you've probably figured it out, but if you look at the top, column 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, when you add them all together, that comes to column 8. So it gives you an idea of what your total liability is as we stand here today. Okay, so that's the math on that page. So going to the next page, what we wanted to do is kind of reset where we are with the high school projects in terms of funding it. As I mentioned before, there was a 2022 bond. That's in column 1. These are all yellow here. The column numbers are on the top. In 2022, the district borrowed approximately $30 million to start funding that high school project. In column 2 in 2023, at the end of 23, there was another $15 million borrowed towards that. And after all said and done, there's some other funds, I think some reserves the district has, some ESSER's money. Some of this money that's since before it was spent was earning interest on it. So we've worked with the administration, and we think the number is 14 million that you need to borrow to fully fund that project. Part of the reason you do these in steps is you kind of see how things play out over time. I think we were planning on borrowing over 60 million. And so by taking our time to get there and earn some interest on the money and see how things sort out, we're kind of able to borrow a little bit less than what we thought, which is a good thing. So that's part of the reason you do this. Part of the reason we did it in steps too was to phase the payment in over time. Because if you borrowed it all at once, you'd have a much bigger payment to absorb in the budget, right? So we wanted to step that in, phase that in. And then the other thing that I should make sure the board knows is when you borrow funds in this tax exempt market, this tax-free market, there are rules that come with it. And one of the rules is that you have to reasonably expect to spend the money within 3 years. So 4 years ago, since we didn't think we were going to spend it all, we couldn't just borrow it all at that time. But this is why we've kind of stepped in and done this phasing plan for fully funding the project, the high school project. So that's kind of a little bit of a background story on where we started and where we are today. I did want to take a moment and go to the next page and explain kind of like the next steps or how this kind of happens and what goes into all this. So typically we would come to the meeting here and give you an idea of how much money we need, what we think the payout would be, and give the board an idea of what that might look like. Then we want to talk a little bit about answering any of your questions. And then if you're comfortable with doing this, you would authorize us to proceed at your meeting. I think it's March 12th. So you have a little paragraph up here authorizing the financing team to get working on this. And that would help us get started on doing some of the things we need to do a bond issue. Then we'd come back to the board. You said, okay, let's go ahead. Then we would get the legal documents approved. It's what's called a bond resolution or a parameters resolution. And basically what that is, that's prepared by your bond counsel and reviewed by your solicitor, where it's about a 20-page document, I'll call it, that outlines the terms and conditions of the bonds. The parameters are set forth as to which the bond could be issued. It helps us comply with all the state laws, the federal laws, things of that nature. And that has to be approved at a public meeting, and it needs to be advertised 72 hours prior to the board action. So once we know what authorizes us to proceed, we get with bond counsel, we get the parameters resolution put together, advertised, and a copy to you before you vote on it on March 26th is the date there. That's kind of how that works. So then from there, Jeff and Doug and I would, and Mike and Jay would go through a credit rating process. Much like you have a credit score, you need to get a credit rating for school district bonds. So we go through that process. That's always a lot of fun and very enjoyable time. But that's the process where we have an interview with a rating agency and they talk a little bit about the project and what's going on in the community and review audits and financials and things of that nature. And then we put together an official statement with the team. If you've ever invested in a mutual fund, you sometimes get a prospectus that talks about the things that are invested. An official statement is somewhat like that discloses information to the investors about project and what's going on in the community and your finances and things of that nature. And then we lock the interest rates shortly after that, and then come to closing, get you your money, and there's some closing papers that need signed, and we think we could hopefully get that all done. I'm gonna put Mike and Jay on the spot, but maybe by Memorial Day, we could probably get all the funds to you by then.
Now,
So that was a
Brad,
lot,
if
but
you want to mention about the parameters resolution,
Oh.
even though we're only borrowing $14 million, the parameters resolution may be bigger.
typically, thank you very much. So when we do a parameters resolution, what we need to do is set it up such that every anticipated payment doesn't get exceeded until the bond's paid off. So you have to figure out an interest rate, a principal amount, and things of that nature. So we have to make sure it fits within that parameter schedule. So although we're talking about $14 million, the parameter schedule would be something larger. We usually put about 20% in there because when we work with investors to buy the bonds and figure out the interest rates, and there's a lot of math that goes on, we have to make sure that the payments are approximately level. So we have to have flexibility within each year to make sure we move things around when we lock the rate. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it will be the 14 million that you want. When the parameters are set forth, there still needs to be what we call an addendum signed. And that would be something that would be presented to the district, to Jeff and so forth, and say, okay, it meets the parameters. This is the 14 million that you wanted, nothing more, nothing less. But it fits within those parameters. And then what happens is after you've approved the parameters, whatever you didn't use, we just write to the state and say, the district didn't use this amount of the parameters. But thank you for bringing that up, because you might say when the parameters resolutions comes, Brad was talking about 14 million. This thing's 17 million. Why is it 17 million? Well, that's the reason for it. Yes.
Is the estimated term 20 years or 25?
It goes out to the 2050-51 school year.
25. So
25?
Yeah, it's 25. Twenty-six.
He wants to go, we could shorten it a year. If we shorten it a year, it would be paid off a year sooner, but the payment would be higher.
Right.
And we want to make sure it fits within whatever Jeff's got budgeted and you have budgeted for the debt service.
Does anyone have any questions right now for this gentleman?
Do you guys want to talk?
I know that was a lot to digest, and then
Mhm.
there's, you have
I'm
some,
gonna add
Mhm.
one thing.
You can get a
So-
microphone to the mic.
Michael Lillies with RBC Capital Markets. When Brad started, he mentioned that the two of us are from RBC Capital Markets. You may be wondering what our role is. A big part of our role is to sell the bonds to the investors. And our job is to try and get you the lowest interest rate in each maturity of the bond. That's our big task, to try and get you least amount of interest cost on your borrowing. So.
we appreciate that job.
Oh.
Any other
Jay
questions?
Wanger, teammates together at RBC.
Any other questions?
I don't think anyone has any at this time.
All right, then we will put that agenda item on the resolution that you see on the March 12th meeting for approval. Thank you.
So moving on to number 7. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Safe travels home. This brings us to number 7, which is feasibility study board discussion.
So I'm not really quite sure where the board would like to start with this conversation. Is this on?
I think so.
Crabtree Rurballs, as we discussed at last meeting, I think did a very thorough job of exploring numerous options for the board. Spent a lot of time in flushing out the facts. And really now the onus is back on the board to kind of plot a direction forward. So I don't know if we have questions we want to talk about first or things to play through here. So I guess I'm kind of pushing it back at the board.
Go right ahead, sir.
Okay. So I've spent some time in the last few days, both looking at budget information that Jeff had provided to us, as well as the feasibility study. And I came up with a few notes that I'd like to share with the rest of the board and administration. I am actually quite, just personally, happy with the feasibility study, the level of detail that's in there, and the different options that have been provided to us, including, like option 3B we asked for, and we've got numbers on that as well. So I think we have a very comprehensive study that provides a lot of great information for us. But the first recommendation I have for the board to consider would be to eliminate option 2 from any further consideration. I think what Crabtree Rohrbaugh has told us, and I think what we had previously believed anyway, is we are experiencing slow and steady growth, but not the kind of growth that would necessitate another building. And, the cost of constructing another building plus maintaining it and staffing it, I think at this point, we probably should just strike that option, not spend any more time on it. I would also, this is a suggestion maybe for Mr. Mummert. In our budget book, I think it's tab 3 at page 2, it talks about, kind of lays out, long-range renovation schedules that we think we might encounter. Currently, that includes like a new intermediate building starting in 2027. I don't think that having that in there is not negatively impacting our other budget numbers right now. I did confirm with Mr. Mummert that our current budget projections do not include debt service for the construction of that intermediate building, but it's just something that's sort of a placeholder just in case we ever need it. And I would ask that maybe at a minimum, we push that down farther in the schedule so that it just doesn't give the impression that there's an intention to construct that building. I also think we should consider the elimination of option 3 and 3B. What I see as a problem there is, that would cause, to implement that plan would cause a very significant rezoning of K-3 students. You'd basically have to take all of your K-3 students that would otherwise go to Park Hills, and they would have to be, rezoned for the other 3 elementary schools. And what I would guess that might happen is the Park Hills students will be rezoned for like Bearsville and West Manheim, which also means probably some Bearsville and West Manheim students then might end up being rezoned to Manheim, to balance that out. That's a lot of moving around. I'm not sure, how friendly, students and parents would be to that kind of an option. On the specific topic of the Park Hills renovation, I think we really ought to give some consideration to this. Right now, we're looking at a plan that would, if it gains board approval by the end of this month, we would go straight into design, and we would be starting construction on a Park Hills renovation project about 1 year from now. And I think we should ask ourselves, in light of what the long-term budget projections are, and in light of some question marks about not only what do we want to do with Park Hills, but what about the middle school, I really believe we should seriously consider delaying any kind of a project for at least a year. That way we know exactly, not only do we determine what we want to do with Park Hills, but we also know if there's any interplay with the middle school as well, which kind of leads us back to the facility study of either option 1 or maybe option 4. So I think if we really, before we consider really pushing to go straight into a Park Hills renovation, I mean, we have to know what is the compelling reason why we absolutely must do this right now. And I think, Mr. Osborne, you might be prepared to talk on that in a minute or two, but, you know, I think we really need to, given what our budget looks like, we need to think about a pause before we immediately jump right into another project. Another additional point, I had asked Mr. Mummert, and unfortunately wasn't until today, so I doubt he's had the opportunity to collect these numbers, but a question I was curious about, right now, the scenario one documents that he gave us last week, what that shows is by the end of the 29-30 fiscal year, by the end of the 5-year projections, we're going to have an accumulated deficit of about $6.1 million. Some of that deficit, some portion of it, would be related to debt service on a Park Hills project that would start in 26, and some of that relates to debt service associated with a West Manheim renovation that is planned to start in 29. So I was just curious if we just pulled out that estimated Park Hills renovation, that estimated West Manheim renovation, then what does that, 5-year projection look like? Again, I didn't ask that question until today, so I don't think there was time to answer that question yet. And that brings me to the last point that if we have a structural deficit that is making it difficult for us to balance our budget just based upon the debt service we already have from the middle school and the high school and our normal operations, then what we may need to consider for any future significant renovation projects, we may need to consider doing that by voter referendum. Give the voters an opportunity to decide what they want or what they're willing to pay for. And then if that referendum passes, that would give us, at least as I understand it, then that would give us the opportunity to add tax millage to specifically pay for that project, whatever that project may be. And I have 2 other points, if you'll bear with me, just briefly, and I'd be happy to repeat any of these or share them with the board as well. So I was thinking about, how does our tax rate and the tax increases on property taxes, how does that compare to inflation, let's say over the past 10 years? So in the budget notebook on tab 1, page 23, it outlines what our property tax rates have been, both in terms of millage and in terms of like a percentage increase each year. And I hope I didn't make any mistakes on this, but what I came up with is that the 10-year average tax increase starting from the 2015, 2016 calendar year up to present was about 2.4%, substantially lower than what the consumer price index increased during that time, 3.3%. So what it looks like is over the past 10 years, our property taxes have increased at a rate that's about 0.9% lower than what inflation has been. Now, I know that no one likes to get a higher property tax bill, but I think that what we're really experiencing is the inflation that we've all experienced in the past 5 years has now fully migrated into our school budget. And if we look especially at the last 5 years, there was at least 2 years that property taxes were not increased at all. And so it's kind of like we've sort of in the past 5 years maybe been living on borrowed time, that we had lower tax increases. We had a lot of money thrown at us from the state and the federal level, but now like that party's over, and unfortunately it looks like we have to pay the piper. And the last point that I'll make, Mr. Mummert, I think, is he's given us some options. We know that the maximum the property taxes could increase under Act 1 is 1.18 mils. If the board were to vote on that 1.18 mil tax increase, then of course, the 10-year period would roll to the right by 1 year, but the 10-year annual property tax increase would be about 2.57%. Again, 2.57% over a 10-year period is appreciably lower than what inflation has been. So not pleasant, but I would hope we try to put everything in context. And so I guess the context that I see is, unfortunately, property tax increase is probably necessary, but this district, it appears, has been doing an excellent job of trying to keep costs under control to ensure that property taxes are not outpacing inflation. And so with that, I conclude.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beard. Would anyone like to go next?
I do have comments.
Go right ahead.
So, in considering this extensively, I come down to two relative unknowns that the board still faces. One is how we resolve our overcrowding at the middle school. And two, what are the necessary renovations at Park Hills? I understand that we have a schedule of renovation we keep to replace a 25-year cycle. But in doing that, I still think we need to, and I emailed that request, I still think we need to very specifically identify what needs to be repaired and replaced at Park Hills. I don't feel like we've done that. And so, nor have we adequately answered the question of how we're going to address the middle school overcrowding. So I don't feel we've reached either of those metrics yet to say all our options should include a renovation of Park Hills, or to say we can solve our overcrowding here at the middle school with a scheduling. On the current timeline, I do want to ask, who else is working with Mr. Winters to address the scheduling here at the middle school?
His teachers are working with him, his guidance counselors. He's looked at the migration of students up through the elementary schools, and they feel that next year they can exist with the current schedule, and throughout the next year, they would have a new schedule in place that could address some of the overcrowding. In addition, Mr. Osborne and I had a very brief discussion today about the possibility of taking some existing full rooms and dividing them so that we can house in maybe 2 rooms that we could do some of our smaller groups and open up some of our full-size classrooms. At one point, this building held 1,300 students without a problem. Programs have changed, demands are different, and so we believe at this point, we may be able to meet those demands through some interior modifications that would not require full-scale modification or full-scale renovation.
So to that effect, I do think that there is possibility to adjust and find some room. The board received a very clear identification of what our class sizes and teams are here at the middle school. In looking at that, I was very alarmed, and I'm sure it's no surprise that, again, by our PDE standard of 25, most of the classes that we got an average report, just so everyone understands. We got a report of the average classes at every team, at every grade in the middle school here. That amounted to 43 averages. Of those 43 averages, I counted only 15 were below 25 students per teacher. That's 15 out of 43 that meet the PDE standard. And again, those are averages, and there was a caveat that some of those averages, there are aberrations in those averages that put a class sizes up at 30, 31 students per teacher. I think that is something that will go to our class sizes, will go to our teacher satisfaction, it will go to our test scores. Again, I think it's something we absolutely need to address. So when you consider that, our class sizes we need to solve that first before we go to Park Hills. In my mind, we haven't clearly identified what needs to be addressed at Park Hills. We haven't solved what the answer is here at West Manheim. And until we do that, I think those are the two answers we have to seek before we go forward on any options. I do note every one of our options includes a renovation to Park Hills. I know that's our schedule, but considering the overcrowding can very clearly be identified as here at EHMMS, that also goes back to the prior discussion we had about when do we reverse our renovation schedule? If we were ever going to reverse that renovation schedule, so students don't go through renovation at elementary, middle, and high school, if we were ever going to reverse that, I think now is the time to consider that as a board, because again, who wants their child to be in a renovated elementary school during renovation and then during middle school and then during high school? It's not a good schedule to keep. So our overcrowding's at the middle school. We used to have the middle school as a 5-8, to your point. The building was originally designed to have 5th through 8th grades. That's how it operated here. Option 4 is a throwback to that. And the reason we went away from a 5 through 8 here was because of the overcrowding at the middle school. The answer back then was to move the 5th grade out of the middle school to the elementary schools because the elementary schools had more room. Now we have overcrowding here again, and we still haven't addressed that issue. And now our elementary schools are seeing the overcrowding because of that move. So I think it's time to consider addressing the middle school. I think it's time to consider addressing the middle school before we address Park Hills. I think that reversal is the time to do that. And lastly, I'll reiterate, back when we approved this high school renovation, I thought it was appropriate to put the money towards where all our students go at the high school because all our students go through there. At the time, we started a $43 million budget. It went up to 70 million. When we hit in the 55 to 60 range, I said we were overspending. And like every household, when you overspend in the following years, you have to engage in cutbacks. We spent, again, $70 million. So it's time to consider delaying another big debt service item like a Park Hills renovation. If we need it, we need to very clearly identify what those needs at Park Hills are. I do agree with Mr. Beard's assertion. A referendum would be a clear conscience way to ask the taxpayers, should we spend $30 million on a Park Hills renovation? I think that's a very clear way to say, should we do this? And one of the things the feasibility study pointed out was we have an aging population here. I think they gave us the feasibility study, our aging population was 45 plus was the average. So most of our population is going to either have students at the end of middle school to high school or not at all. So those are the taxpayers that's funding this. So I think it's appropriate to ask them this year on the ballot, do you want your school district to engage another $30 million of debt, especially when we look at a budget that includes a $6 million shortfall in 5 years? So I think that's a very honest, transparent way to ask the taxpayers, should we increase your taxes? And with that, that's where I'm at. I think those are my considerations.
Thank you.
So first, I want to thank Mr. Beard because he and I share many of the same thoughts and many of the same things I was going to bring to the table on this coming Monday when we were going to further talk about the budget. So I greatly appreciate his summation, particularly about options 2, 3, and 3B. I guess the first question or clarification I need to go to what Mr. Galazello was asking. So approximately a year ago, you gave a very detailed overview of all of the buildings and where you saw major projects and the timelines related to them. So in the spirit of his question in particular, knowing what you know about the buildings and the conversations, very detailed conversations we had around this time roughly last year, has there been significant downfall in Park Hills? I know that the HVAC was a driving force as it was with the high school. So more poignantly, are there other aspects of Park Hills that are on the brink of failure or have failed of late?
So the cooling system remained an issue up until just this past summer. We were able to put it back together with yet another rebuild on the compressors. That's really probably the big concerning mechanical feature there, that when that fails, it's quite expensive. Poses an extreme challenge to be able to put kids in the building if the AC system's not functioning, depending on the time of the year. Since then, another recent failure that we had was the domestic hot water system for heating the hot water. We had a water heater go out. Trying to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar and anticipating that Park Hills was next on our planned renovation schedule, we actually harvested one of the water heaters from the high school that had been disconnected and replaced with brand new ones for that renovation, and figured, hey, if we can get another 2-3 years out of this water heater, it didn't cost us anything but some time. So we did go ahead and install that. So I feel like we're on borrowed time. It's getting the job done now, but it was a water heater, it's getting long in the tooth the way it was, and we're trying to get every last ounce out of it.
How many do we have?
Excuse me?
How many water heaters do we have in the building?
Should be 3, I believe.
Okay.
The big building definitely have 3. That one could possibly have 2. I'm trying to remember.
And the cooling system, is that for the entire building or a section? Do we have other ones?
The chiller system, it's a big central plant. It has multiple compressor heads in it. So one compressor head in itself isn't an ultimate shutdown failure, 98% of the time. If it would happen to hit on a extreme high demand day, if it happened to occur on a 98-degree day, it would probably be problematic. We've had issues at that building when it gets real high temperatures, being able to get down to desired set points. Now, the building, in my mind, in all reality, is still habitable. It's not 98 degrees in the building, but, does it rise to 76, 77? Sometimes it does, yes. Another fear for me as a facilities director on that building, we've got approximately half the roof was installed in 2001. It's getting out there. It's going to be 25 years old. Best case scenario till we can address that. It's a 20-year roof, and we're 5 years beyond that already.
When was the other half?
The other half is 2013 or 14. So I think this is the building assessment you were referring to.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And if it helps, I can pull it up and put it on the screen. Trying to find the roof notes here quick. 2013, yes. Those are the big mechanical issues that concern me. Electrically, we're at year 25, probably realistic. I think as we go through the mechanical engineer's assessment of the building and the feasibility study, he pegs that more like a 30-year life cycle. So while it's not an inherent hanging over my head thing that scares me, it is getting close to the point where we're going to start having issues on finding replacement parts. A lot of this stuff doesn't get supported forever and ever. So it becomes a bigger challenge if breakers wear out, burn out. If we need to do a swap and upgrade something, it gets challenging at times to locate breakers on some of these aged panels in the buildings. The building automated control system is very important to our staff as far as being able to manage the HVAC end of the building, getting good efficiency out of the systems, turning it on and off, cycling. As I mentioned, the chillers, it's got multiple heads. So we want to make sure not the same heads running all the time. We want to cycle it and share the load. The BAS system enables us to do that. That system that's currently in the building now Was originally, the bones of it is a Siemens system that they stopped supporting back in 2021. We have another newer system riding over top of it, but in all reality, to make it what it should be, it would be good to do a complete BAS system upgrade, the same as what we did in this building, the same as what we're doing in the high school, to get us fully on a platform that is supported and backed up by the guys that write the software for it. Things like the intercom system, the bell system, stuff is way beyond its expected life cycle. Has gotten finicky. The staff there has learned what they can and can't do with it and has learned to work with it, but is definitely less than ideal. Building security wise, door hardware and stuff, again, getting toward the end of the life cycle. While it's functioning, we fix it. We have to be ready to scramble and go address stuff. And, the older it gets, the more those things pop up. And when it comes to building security, of course, we take that quite seriously and prioritize that. So, we end up dropping one job to go over and work on a door latch is not latching or functioning correctly, or the card access system isn't functioning correctly. Architecturally, to me, these aren't things that keep me awake at night, but when you walk into the building, we're talking about trying to provide a environmentally nice place for learning, something that supports the learning process, something that teachers and kids feel good about being in, beyond those mechanical systems. When you go through and look at the casework in that building, the old pressure laminated cabinets and casework, stuff's delaminating, it's getting chipped, it's discolored, shelves are bowing. It looks tired. Flooring in classrooms, flooring in offices are the same boat. Things that pop out and grab my eye is the 25-year-old acoustical ceiling tile. If you go in and look at it, it's one of those things I notice. It's all sagging, it's all discolored, it looks old and dingy. We're currently working on upgrading our technology package in our buildings as we bring the smart screens to the classrooms, IP phones, getting off the old analog stuff, which most businesses do not use anymore. That all requires new cabling, new routes for the data, which that building doesn't have at this point. So we have to go in and be able to try to fish that through if we don't tackle it with a more comprehensive package. There's a lot of little things that kind of fall in together till you do the HVAC. We almost have to drop the ceilings. And while you drop the ceilings, we can do the data. While the ceilings are out, well, we might as well paint the walls. Well, we did all that work over top of all those old floors. We might as well replace the floors. So I agree with you. I understand, what do we need to do? And there's always discussion what absolutely needs to be done. But in the nature of Southwestern School District providing nice, sound, secure, appropriate classroom spaces, in my mind, my opinion, it's really a no-brainer. The building really needs to be going through and given that freshening up. As I said, there's some very specific, hard mechanical things that would cause us to have to cancel school for the day if they failed. If we don't have hot water, if we have one of the old copper pipes from the original part of the build burst again, which we've had some of those bursts, and they've leaked a lot of water. Those things can possibly call off the school day. And that's what I'm working diligently to try to prevent. Not to say we can't get another year, another 2 years, but you're gambling once you get over 25 years, in my opinion. A lot of this stuff, we are trying to get everything we can get out of it, but when is it prudent? When is it just kind of playing Russian roulette?
Thank you for sharing that perspective. So from your notes prior that you're reading from, and I'm so glad that you brought that because this is exactly what I was referring to. There, it is very much in alignment now as where it was then, or you're saying there's been additional deterioration or degradation?
Well, I would propose there's nothing surprising going on. To me, it's pretty much tracking as expected. It's 25 years since the last remodel. for the water heaters to start failing. It's no surprising for the air conditioning system, to have multiple compressor rebuilds on it over the last couple of years. One of my notes as I was reviewing earlier today, based on your questions, is the first time we had to address a compressor head, it was 8 to 9 years old. Then the next time it was 6 years. And now this time we're down to 5 to 4 years. That time frame between rebuilds keeps getting tighter and tighter. And each time it happens, it's in the neighborhood of probably $15,000 to $20,000 to rebuild a head. The other challenge that we're facing there, again, with the obsolescence thing, that system's an R22 refrigerant in that system. It's getting very difficult to find it. When you do find it, it's incredibly expensive. It's not only one generation old, it's 2 generations removed now. We've moved R22 to 410A, and now even 410A is phased out. So it just gets more and more difficult to maintain what we have.
Thank you.
I don't think anybody's happy with ever having to raise taxes, and I agree with what Mr. Beard was saying. As much as I would love for our taxpayers to vote on a ballot to raise our taxes, my fear going out with referendum would be how many of our taxpayers don't even understand the condition of our schools. And on top of that, the parents at that school would be impacted, but the other school parents would not be impacted. So as much as I think a referendum would sound great, I don't know if it's the right thing to do. And I'll even ask Mr. Mummer, if do you know if in our area, if the taxpayers have ever voted to raise their own taxes?
In our area, no. I think there's only been maybe 8 or 9 voter referendums in the state of Pennsylvania, and they've been for construction projects, I believe. Jay, I don't know if you,
Yeah, so,
I know State College was one, it's the only one, and that's not that close to here.
yeah, the way I understand a referendum is you go to a referendum when you exceed your ability to raise taxes. For example, if you want to go above the Act 1 index, then you go to the referendum and say, would you be willing to go above the Act 1 index, which governs how much a board can raise taxes in order to do a project? And if you put that project out and it's voted down, it's done. You cannot do it. So if you are managing your budget, and Mr. Gelsinger, I agree with you. I'm not a fan of raising taxes. No one around this table is. I am a huge fan of providing a great education for kids in Southwestern School District. And sometimes that does come with that unfortunate burden of taxes, and I'm not saying that lightly. What I am saying is that if you go to a referendum to raise taxes at all, you're abandoning your ability as an elected official to go up to the Act 1 index without voter approval. And that's how we operate the budget. And to Mr. Beard's point, I think you'll see that over the past 10, 15, 20 years, long before I got here, and probably even before Mr. Mummer was here, the district has a history of being very fiscally responsible and also maintaining what I would call exceptional facilities. And so when you look at this project, that the way it's set up, and I do believe this came with Mr. Mummer, as debt service comes on, typically debt service falls off. Now, when we go to a 25-year loan as opposed to a 20-year loan, that might be a little different because of the cost to borrow or the cost to do projects is obviously significantly increased. But I would say that when you look at Park Hills, it is functional. However, there are issues that Nate and I have had a lot of discussions about where I do fear we'll close schools. If it wasn't Mr. Osborne, was it about 3 or 4 years ago, we had that pipe break behind one of the classrooms we had to close? And then they had to crawl underneath the crawl space to go and fix it. Unfortunately, we were only out one day, but then we dealt with a lot of residual vapor in the air, and which caused concern about some mold, and which fortunately nothing happened. We tested the air quality. So those are the types of things that when you think about Park Hills, the schedule that's been in place, again, long before I arrived, has kept our facilities up where everything breaks in your house, your car, and there's your maintenance. But I think Nate and his team have done an outstanding job of making sure that those breaks don't become problematic. And part of that issue is because the district is committed to maintaining facilities. And so I think that's what we have to keep in mind. Again, this superintendent, no superintendent will sit in front of a board and say, yes, we love raising taxes. We don't. Not at all. We do everything we can, but I do feel like over the past few weeks, and Mr. Mummer can probably share some more of this on Monday, I feel like we're getting that structural deficit significantly lower. And I think it will be something that the board will be pleased with. And it's all done with the idea that maintaining outstanding facilities, an exceptional program, and a responsibility to our taxpayers.
Last thing I had was, me personally, I think the taxpayers vote us in here for a reason, to make those decisions. I personally can't look some of them in the face whenever some of the decisions were made at the high school, but I was not on the board at that time. I will use one example that I still to this day, it breaks my heart. But I thought that $1 million raising of the roof in the cafeteria was an absolute waste of taxpayer dollars. And I remember Dr. Burkhart sitting at this table actually not recommending that. And the prior board went ahead and voted on that. So me personally, as long as we're not doing things like that, and if we're presented with options that we have to raise taxes to ensure our kids have a good education in buildings that are, to quote Mr. Osborne, nice, sound, and secure, then I'll have to make that hard decision.
My thoughts were very similar to what Mr. Gelsinger just said, and thank you, Mr. Beard, for bringing up most of the things that I was already thinking of. However, I would be more entertained to see option one, as far as half a roof, HVAC system, ceilings, shelves, things like that. I would be more entertained to see that number 20% less than what it is. I think 31 million is insane to renovate Park Hills. On the other side of things, to what Mr. Gelazila was saying, when we look at class sizes, I'm concerned that we're a little cart before the horse on that one at the current moment. We need more info on it. 3 of us did tour all but 1 or all but 2 special ed classrooms in the middle school on Friday. We had a wonderful time, and we got to see the demographics of those rooms, how the space worked out, things like that. That's why I think if we just say, hey, this is the average class size, my concern is if it would affect those classrooms the wrong way, because we did get a more firsthand perspective of how they operate. And I could only think of 2 of them that could even stand to be a little bit smaller. So my concern is with the scheduling, I don't want to stress out our teachers that have the biggest load in the district. So I want to make sure that we're not too far ahead on that and we're still gathering information, because I definitely don't want to negatively impact all of those classrooms and those teachers and the stress that they already have on them. So I think we need more info on that as far as to how that's going in the middle school before I would make any judgments on that, honestly. Because there's definitely, and some of them, it's a fluid situation. It changes from week to week as well, as far as how much space they need in certain classrooms. So there's definitely a lot of factors to that one as far as class size. I think we got to do a lot more conversation and homework on that. So that's what I saw just within the past few days.
So, a couple things to the voter referendum topic. Believe it or not, coming from me, and be shocked to hear, I feel like that's putting feelings versus logic and reality. I'm not concerned about okay, I take that back. I am concerned about what taxpayers think. But as Mr. Gelsinger said, they did vote us in to make those hard decisions. So I'm not so sure I want to ask them on a ballot if they feel we need to raise or not raise, because that could become a battle of a lot of things. Don't raise. Oh, but why my school, but not that school? That could become just a whole poop show, as an understatement. So I'm not concerned about the feelings aspect about oh God, what I think versus the logic and the reality of it, of the situation. So that's the referendum topic. I don't, my oldest is 30 and she was at Park Hills since kindergarten. So that would be 25 years roughly ago, 25 years ago. Ever do I remember, no, never since my kids have been here for 25 years has the middle school, then an intermediate, because it changed to middle school, what, a few years ago? Was there ever a fifth grade there? Aside from, I think, during one like renovation type thing. Aside from that, it was never a fifth through eighth grade school. Not as long as my kids have been here, which has been 25 years. So I'm not sure where it was intended to have the fifth grade in there. I want to strike out option 4. Yes, option 4. I don't feel developmentally, mentally, and emotionally a fifth grader belongs in a school with an eighth grader. Bus, school, and anything of the like. So if you take even the money part out, I just don't even feel like the fifth and eighth graders should be in the same school together to begin with. So for me, I don't even think option 4 is an issue for me either. So.
I'm sorry, Ms. Weaver.
Of course.
Just for clarification, when this building was constructed in 1972, it was a 5 to 8 building. I went to this building as a fifth grader. I rode the school bus as a fifth grader that had students between 5th and 12th grade. I'm not sure exactly when it transitioned from a 5 to 8 to a 6 to 8. But it was at one time a 5 to 8 building.
So I guess over 25 years ago then, at some point.
Well,
Either way, times are changed and
Sure.
I personally do not
right.
feel.
And I understand your point. I have
No.
heard, the general argument that 5 to 8 is too much of a difference in age and maturity to have in the same building. 5 to 12 is too much to put on one school bus. Conversely, I've also heard other folks say that K to 5 is too big of a span to put in one building. I think it's probably 6 of one, half dozen of another. Every school system has a certain way they do things. Actually, in Fairfax County, my daughters went up through, their elementary school was a K to 6. And then their secondary school was a 7 to 12. 7 through 12 was, although they tried to separate the 7th and 8th graders from the upperclassmen, it was, 7 to 12 in the same school. So I think it's just, there's probably 12 different ways to do it, and none is necessarily better than the other.
Thank you. So for me, again, I would just like to say, I think Mr. Beard, you were the perfect person to start this conversation off. I think after sitting through last week's meeting where we saw the budgetary numbers, and while I have full faith that the administration is working to do everything they can to bring that deficit closer to zero, although never have the expectation it will be zero. I don't know how we can have any conversation except for conversation with option 1. I mean, we're in trouble. And it's not trying to be doom and gloom. I think we're in trouble even if we raise taxes. So I agree with what I've heard. I agree that we need to know exactly what the projects are that are the most important, and those need to be fixed. We owe our kids that building because it's grossly unfair to say, well, we don't have the money now, so we may have to close your school if the chiller goes out. And I know these are all ifs, but we also know that ifs happen. We've seen it happen in other buildings. Mannheim was misplaced to the middle school a couple years ago because something went out and they couldn't run Mannheim for a couple days. So they brought all the kids to the middle school and they were in the auditorium for school for a couple days. It wasn't ideal, but we got through it. So there's definitely the ifs happen. But looking at the numbers and going over what Jeff sent, I think to maintain what we have as being a district that is conservative in its spending, excellent in its budgeting. I mean, Doug and Jeff win awards for our budgeting. I think we need to listen to them. And I think we need to realize that right now, the only available option is option one. And even that, to your point, if there's cost savings there, I know we don't want to move kids, but, and they're not here tonight, but I bet you if we asked CRA if any of these options guaranteed we'd never have to move kids again, they would not say yes. Because Mannheim is shrinking. And at some point, unless we want to close Mannheim, we're moving kids to Mannheim. And we're moving kids to Mannheim for an excellent educational experience. And that might look like pushing roads over, coming up through the park a little bit further to Mr. Beard's point, but it's gonna happen. And if we look at our numbers, and I do believe what Dr. Burkhardt said about them looking at the schedule, and I think a change to the schedule at the middle school could be very beneficial. Looking at the elementary school numbers that were given to us last Thursday, there is one more bubble year next year, 5th grade, where we see those class sizes at 25, 26, 27. And then we see them start to peter off. Now, we will add kids. Of course, we will add kids. We know building is happening. But, we also have a very, very low kindergarten enrollment so far this year, which is also worrisome. Somewhat explained due to the fact that those children would have been born in the year of 2020 when everybody was terrified and no one was having babies. So that makes sense to me. But I also think that has created a large shift in the way that people are bringing up their families. And we also need to be prepared for that as well. So I appreciate everybody's points of view. I think we made a lot of really valid points. And I don't know if we've given any direction to Mr. Osborne, but it is very nice to have everybody's points of view and see where everybody's at. So I'm very grateful for that. Would anyone have anything else they'd like to add at this point before we move on for Mr.? Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
So a few follow-ups. Option 4, to my mind, by adding space at a 5 through 8 level, allows us to very simply have trailers deployable to elementary schools so we're not ever redistricting kids again. And what I mean by that is CRA very clearly stated that our population variability happens at the elementary level. It's for that reason that I think we should be considering having trailers on hand to deploy in those years when we get bubbles at specific schools. So we're not trading our kids around like playing cards. They should be able to attend one school, one group of teachers, one group of friends, and be assured that's going to be their experience all through the middle school. I think that is a damage we're doing to our kids that I'll never vote for. And that's why option 4 allows us a way to never have to redistrict again. And when we talk about our role to decide whether we're increasing taxes, when we went to the high school renovation, one of the frustrations, and experience really is instructive. When I argued against the expense that's occurring at the high school, the estimates were given per square foot. And that's the way they will continue to present to us, is this is the square foot cost to do this area. And I pressed very hard to get specifics where we could cut costs. And it was given solely in square foot estimates. And then what happened later on down the road was when we came to value engineering, after the money had already been allocated, that is when we got, hey, we can cut money here and we can cut money there. That wasn't this board doing it. That was our facilities administrator, who's very good at what he does, finding those savings. But you talk to our role as leaders to decide where this cost should be, we should be looking at that as well. And where the best way to make that happen is to put it on the ballot, which forces this district to very clearly communicate to everyone exactly what we're improving in that Park Hills building. And by doing that, it forces us to very clearly identify everything we're spending in that school. If we don't proceed that way, we will continue to get per square foot estimates that don't specifically address what we need, what we're spending our money on. And that's why I'm a strong advocate for making this a referendum and I'm not saying we just put it on the ballot. I'm saying we deliver it to the community. We have a meeting with our community and we identify to our communities very specifically what we're improving in Park Hills. And I think if we do that, we live in a predominantly family-oriented area. I think if we're effective in communicating what we need to fix in Park Hills, they may vote for it. And maybe I'm dreaming, because most referendums, they get defeated, let's be honest. But putting it in front of the taxpayer in this district is the most transparent way to say these are the costs involved. And that's why, as a leader, I think we should be doing that so that we can get those exact costs. I've struggled to get them at the high school. And again, Nate, you found us innumerable cost savings, but that's our role to do first, and then yours. And I think it's reversed. So
If I can speak to that a little bit,
Yes, sir.
I understand where you're coming from with that. It'll always be difficult to get anything other than a square foot number from the architects because they're living in a world of, this is the average estimate number. That's the detail level that they know. As far as putting it in front of the community, as far as what we're going to do, something that is in place commonly in Pennsylvania that I propose we should do. We didn't do it at the high school because technically it fell underneath the guideline where it was mandated. But I think in just general good practice, you have an Act 34 meeting where you have a meeting with the community. The architects present what the project is and they talk about the scope of the project and the estimates. And that is a very, very transparent meeting for your community to be able to see exactly what's being proposed and what's being done. But again, it's something that traditionally happens after these architects have been given the directive of
And
the
that's too
board's
late.
desire is what the board wants to see done and comes up with the conceptual plans and are morphing into construction plans. I would propose probably the best way that I can think of. My recommendation to the board would be, and I think it's very relevant, you speaking to your idea of, can we cut this down to a $20 million project instead of a $30 million project? I think it is very relevant and appropriate for this board to think about. And, if we need to go through my list in more detail or walk the building and talk about it and come up with a priority list for the architects to give them that directive, say, hey, this is what we as a board see and support. And we don't want to see the entrance ceiling blown up to 2 stories tall just for the sake of a architectural impact, lighting. We want to see this, we want to see that. I think the board can have a voice in that up front, and I think it would be beneficial for the architects to hear, hey, this is our guiding parameters of what we are and aren't looking for. And I guess the one other thing, and I'll throw it out there, I don't want to make you feel like I'm twisting your arm or pushing you to make a decision you guys are not ready to make, because you have to be ready to make it and you have to be comfortable with it. But I'll just throw out there that, all this was based on that timeline that, I feel like we have this desire to come up with a resolution by the fall of 2027, and the window of opportunity is very small. And so however we give that directive to the architects, we'll have to stay on this course and really work through it and get it done if that's the board's
That
desire.
timeline was developed based on our overcrowding issue.
Correct. That timeline was something I put together based on the perception that, in my mind, I felt this board had the desire that we need to do something for capacity issues at the elementary buildings.
Right,
If-
and that's why it takes back the discussion back there, right? So we haven't adequately answered what we're gonna do for overcrowding. The most overcrowding we have is here in this building, and we're still focused on Park Hills first. And our point in establishing our timeline was to deal with our overcrowding, and our overcrowding is the most alarming here. Do we disagree there?
I do, but
Okay.
business
So
department
where
guy.
would
I'm
you,
not in education.
no, but I do want to understand, where would you say we're overcrowded more than here?
Well, I feel like in my mind, I feel like the elementary's based on the rooms that I have been involved with changing storage rooms into pull out educational spaces. The fact that storage rooms are now the office for itinerant, guidance or therapy or psychologists. I'm seeing us putting spaces into use for educational presentation that they weren't designed for that at the elementary level. This building, we haven't been pushed to that to this point. And I look at this building, while we feel full here, it still goes back to our PDE ultimate capacity on this building is like 1,500 students. And then we apply that 85% utilization rate and it drops us down to 1,300, which is still less than what we have in this building. So again, this is coming from the business department side. I'm not the education side. So I mean, I just feel like there's schedules, there's processes that we've chosen as a district to put in place here that fills this building up. And I'm not, I think it's just human nature that if there's space available, we're going to use it. We're going to fill it. If there's a classroom sitting here, we're going to put it to use. And as it should be, there's nothing wrong with that. But then the problem becomes difficult when we need that space back for something else and we try to reel it in and reprioritize.
I
We
have-
get a lot of pushback on that.
Mr. Osborne, I have heard that argument a lot, that it's hard to take that space back. To my way of thinking, and this is just mine, is it's an assertion of will, is we need this for teaching our kids, we take the class. And that goes back to prompting me to something else. In a couple of the options that were presented to this board under CRA, they labeled us as having 8 extra classrooms under options, this or that. And I, to your point, if we have people in closets as guidance, then they're not extra. They're space we need. Again, I come back to, we address needing space in our elementaries with trailers, and we need to address this building where all the kids funnel through this. This continues to be a place where we overcrowd. When we get bubbles anywhere, the bubble starts here and goes to high school. We address the high school, then that's most logical place to address is here. And it should be based on our overcrowding for our kids, not for aging equipment. That's, and with that,
So why wouldn't you consider putting trailers at the middle school level?
we could.
Mr. Beard.
I just want to clarify just a couple things. First, the option 4, which adds space to the middle school to add the 5th grade here and to pull the 5th graders from the elementary to place them here at the middle school. That obviously would free up, if we pull the 5th graders out of the elementary schools, that would free up quite a bit of classroom space. So we probably wouldn't need any trailers at the elementary level because they would now just be K-4. I think, Mr. Smith, you had mentioned about Park Hills renovation, and I did note in the feasibility study, while option 1 is estimated around $30 million, that's not only the price, the estimated cost to renovate Park Hills as is, but also adding additional classrooms. In the feasibility study, the cost simply to just renovate Park Hills as is, to refresh the building without adding any space, was around 20, like 18 to 21 is the estimate. On the topic of Crabtree Rohrbaugh and square footage estimating, Mr. Osborne, you might, and Mr. Mummert can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I believe the architects are going to design and they're going to use kind of standard estimating procedures to estimate what's it going to cost to either refurbish a building or maybe refurbish it and add classrooms. Ultimately, no matter what any of us might estimate, or no matter what the architects might estimate for costs, the proof is when you put that out to bid you might estimate a project to be 50 million, but if all the bids come back at 70 million, then 70 million is the price. But I do think, at least as I look forward, if I'm still on the board, I think we, as a board and as an administration, we need to make sure that we're giving clear guidance to the architects as to what we're looking for, or the things we're looking for, or what we're not looking for as they design it. And then also, once they present a design to us, it's our responsibility to look at that design and scrutinize it, and to start pulling out the things that aren't necessary, pull those things out before it even goes to bid. And then once, of course, it's put out to bid, any kind of cost savings that the general contractor might recommend or suggest, we have to be maybe a little bit tighter in our wallet than the prior board was when we consider what some of those cost saving those cost saving measures might be. And lastly, I would suggest, I know that, Mr. Osborne did a great job of laying out some of the risks associated with delaying a Park Hills renovation. But I do think that our primary concern, our buildings are in pretty good shape. And I think our primary concern should be to make sure that if we think we have overcrowding, we need to address that overcrowding, and that is more important than, following a renovation cycle based on, the mechanicals of the building. So I'm not sure whether we really have an overcrowding. I think we're getting mixed signals on the middle school, whether it's overcrowded or not. But I don't see that there's any way that I could not be a yes vote on any project until we know for certain what is the situation in the middle school. Is it overcrowded or not? If it is overcrowded, what are the options to alleviate that overcrowding? And we would have to have that information before we could make any decision on what we're doing.
And in addition, thank you for that. I would also like to state that from my perspective, we've talked about classrooms, we've talked about crowding, we've talked about building perspective, but options 2, 3, 3B, and 4 all adversely affect transportation. So I would very much like to know from that perspective, given who's in the room, if there is a perspective from transportation that would like to be shared as well.
I'm not really prepared to really input on that right now.
Okay, but that is something that I think needs to be taken into consideration purely because options 2, 3, 3B, and 4 would be fairly significant.
How does
And
4, I'm sorry to interrupt, how does 4 factor into the transportation? I don't understand that one.
if all of 5th grade is no longer at the elementary level and they're all now in the same transportation schedule as the middle and high school, and if memory serves, wasn't 5th one of the bubble years?
Yes.
So they would all be taken off of the first run of the bus and put on the second run. That's important for us to take into consideration. Does that mean additional buses? Does that mean additional bus runs? Does that mean additional bus drivers? So that all has to be taken into consideration.
I thought one of the things CRA recommended, if that was a planned course of action, was offset scheduling. So they would actually start at a different time, allowing them to get the students here.
I know that was a recommendation, but I believe we need to hear from the people who would be managing those expectations.
Thank you, Mr. Harrell.
With the building another building with the offset schedule, that would have the drivers running 4 routes in the morning, correct?
Constructing another building,
Right.
I might be guessing
If-
here, but I
for
think
that one.
constructing another building is off the table.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
not a
One of
consideration.
the options was if we were turning Park Hills into a 4 or 5 building. What that would require is taking some of those students from Manheim and bringing them all the way up here to Park Hills. That may require a different bell schedule system, because you'd have elementary, you'd have this 4 or 5 building, then you have the secondary. And that's where that would become potentially troublesome or problematic from a transportation standpoint.
That would add more hours to each driver and need more drivers and buses.
And also from the perspective of option 4, which is adding an addition to the middle school to convert it from a 6 to 8, but a 5th to 8. So pulling the 5th grade, and they would then go on the same bus as the high schoolers and
So-
the current middle schoolers.
Again,
That's
you
that's
could
the
add
part
more
I'm not
routes.
understanding,
So
honestly.
the fifth graders would disappear from the elementary runs, but they would appear with the secondary runs.
So it would take
And
the load off your elementary routes, but then currently your secondary routes would be extremely full, which means we need more routes.
Right, and not only that, but they're larger students,
No 3 to a seat.
physically
3 to a
larger
seat.
students.
Because right now we're having some buses have 60 kids to a bus on a secondary route just because of where they're at. And 3 kids, the bus is built for 72, but 3 kids to a seat, that's tight. It really is.
Thank you for sharing.
You don't feel like pulling the buses from the elementary and sending them to that 5th grade would offset? Because we're sending less kids to our elementary schools, so we need less buses. So those buses could be reassigned to the middle school routes.
They still run the whole route,
The
though.
same, yeah, they ride the
They'd
same
need them
route.
for K through 4.
Yes, but
Unless
if
we're
you
misunderstanding.
consolidate the 4 kids off this bus and you put it on one bus, the bus is still running the same route. You're taking a set amount of kids from each bus that would be 5th grade going to an elementary school, and now they're together on a bus going to the middle school.
It would all depends on where they currently live at as well.
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Burkert, since Ms. Bauer brought up the idea of transportation from an academic standpoint, option 4, bringing 5 in, our current 5th graders do not operate, obviously, on the same type of a schedule that our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders operate. They do not take world language. They do not take half a year of science and half a year of social studies. In your mind, would that option need those 5th graders to operate almost as their own building within a building? Or would they absorb into the idea of that period schedule?
They would probably operate somewhat independent of the other building. However, you would more than likely have to add specialists to the building because the way it's set up now, your music, your chorus, phys ed, art, they're full. They can't handle any more sections. So if we were to make this building larger by bringing 5th grade over, we would more than likely either have to have itinerant staff from the elementary come over, which is possible, or hire additional staff. And I don't know what it would do to the capacity of the cafeteria. So we'd have to look at that too. We'd probably have to add another lunch wave. So right now they run a pretty long, there's a big section of the day that lunch is involved. So we would have to look at what would that mean for the kids with eating lunch.
Aren't our specialists here, are they the classes I should assume that are the 30 plus? Is the specialist classes?
Your art and your music and, I mean, I didn't look at that. Mr. Winters did send it. I didn't take a look at it. It could be, some of the other ones could be like your social studies class or, because some of the kids are pulled out for special education services, so that drives that number down because they're pull out. But if nobody's pulled out, sometimes those classes are a little bit larger, and that's where you get a little differentiation between the teams.
Would you envision needing more administrators there as well? If you're putting that many.
Probably
kids-
dean, you might have to, you probably consider a dean. Because then you would be at a building of about, would be about the size of the high school, maybe even a little bit bigger.
And Mr. Beard's pointing to the class sizes here. Exploratory teachers, is that
Yeah.
is that what the specialists,
Yeah.
specials are that, and collocates all of them? And
There's a
again,
lot of them, though. It's just, it's not.
We have foreign language.
again, it's averages. I would like to know how many we have 30 plus or how many, like, I get the averages and why that was presented that way, but when you get to those upper ranges, I'd like to
I
know
think,
more
well,
specificity.
the thing you're gonna have to keep in mind too is you're driving down a class size, now you're adding staff.
Mhm.
And that's an ongoing cost that if you're looking at let's say a $2 million structural deficit with the staff we have, if you have to add a whole team, let's just say 4 teachers, that's another $500,000, Doug, give or take.
Correct, but that's the role. We have to educate the kids.
I
And
understand that,
once
but
we
if
get to
you,
a
if you
30
could redo that schedule, or if we could look at giving science year round instead of half a year, with every other day, that could split the kids a little more evenly. And if we have some of our classrooms where smaller groups can go into smaller, there's one class right now I know we're taking back next year in this building that's a full-size class. It's going to be back in rotation for classes to use. So those are the types of things that a lot of what you're asking, you deserve the answers for, but sometimes I can't give that to you right now because we're still working through what that staffing would look like, or, nobody wants a size class of a 30 classroom. But if we have 3 years after fifth grade goes through and they drop to 23, 24, now you've added a lot of classrooms that might not necessarily be needed. And that's maybe where the answer is not that I'm not a fan of trailers, but that might be if you're looking at a 2-year solution or a 3-year solution until the bubble gets through, and mindfulness for the taxpayer, that's maybe a more practical solution as opposed to adding a whole fifth grade wing.
Which still includes adding teachers.
But it's also, if you add a wing, you're adding custodians, you're gonna add another lunch wave, you're gonna add, there's so many more pieces to the puzzle that become expensive. And if you're looking at an area where we're exploding and all these houses are giving us 0.75, 0.76, I think at that point you are talking about a new building. But when you're looking at half of that and a declining, and maybe kindergarten will be bigger than it normally is or average, but right now it is well below where we normally are. So that lines up with what we're seeing from the feasibility study, and it also lines up with what we're seeing from national reports where the birth rate is going down. And so the part of me from the educational perspective want to offer the best program possible, and the superintendent taxpayer side says, I don't want to build a building that's going to sit empty. So that's kind of the struggle, the push and the pull. And so if you look at that bubble coming through, what's behind it? And is there a temporary solution that would be cost effective so that when that bubble's gone, we don't have empty rooms, but that we're heating and cleaning, but rather, again, Nate and I have had this, Mr. Osborne and I have had these conversations a million times. We are not fans of modulars. However, in this case, looking at the bubble, that might be an answer. Because if we put it back there and say it's here for 2 years and we know that, I think more people can accept that than it's here in lieu of building an addition as a way to get around it. I don't want to do that. So we have bubbles. Fifth grade's coming up. We have to look at the schedule. As I said, there's at least one, if not 2 rooms I know we're taking back next year that are going to be full classrooms that they could rotate kids through. I do think we can fix it, but I can't promise you that it wouldn't require a temporary solution. I don't have that answer at this point.
I do feel like we've debated this thoroughly, but I do want to, that does lead into one question I've been hesitating to bring up because it opens up a whole nother discussion. But if we want to go to trailers, do we have to plan that now for next year? Or when do we need to have that preparation in place to go to trailers?
I would defer. Well, I don't think Mr. Winters felt comfortable that we didn't need to do that for
But
next
if we
year.
would need to, what's the lead time?
I'd have to defer to Mr. Osborne.
Yeah, we would need to be putting that into motion now to be prepared for the start of the school year. It takes probably 6 to 8 weeks for them to mobilize the
Mhm.
modular unit, put it in place, put it on a foundation, tie it down, put electric communications to it. So
And that's,
it's really something we'd have to start the procurement process.
right, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because I want us to be prepared if we're going to have that as an option. I don't want to face like we did before, where we're too late, we can't do it. I want us to be prepared to, if we want to go to that, to have that prepared and ready. So I don't know where, Ms. Weaver, where we set that on agenda, but I think that's a conversation we should be having very soon, so that we're prepared ahead should we have overflow. I would go back to my initial argument without wide debate that having 2 or 3 trailers we can put down on a pad depending on what school needs it. We'd have pads at our schools that could take a trailer, that are developed and ready for a trailer, and we would own a trailer or 2 for overflow. So I don't,
So
Store it. Where? Storage of it. That's what we have to consider as well.
but to that point, if we have pads and every school ready to take a trailer, the storage is we can leave it at whatever school it was at until it's needed somewhere else.
Jeff, just because you've been here so long. Do companies traditionally sell them or is it mostly leasing?
We have leased them in the past. You can purchase them outright. The challenge when you purchase them outright is they're yours. And it's sometimes difficult to get rid of them, to resell them. And in most cases, most districts aren't looking to have that as a permanent solution. So,
Right.
we had trailers at West Manheim, the old West Manheim, years and years ago. Well, they became a permanent part of that structure, even though they were still trailers at the back end of the building. When we did the middle school project a couple years ago, we brought in trailers. We did that specifically to be able to create swing space so that they could continue to do work and construction on existing classrooms and move kids around so that we were able to get the construction done faster so that you could save money on construction costs. So I would say, generally speaking, if you're looking at it as a short-term solution, I would lease them. The leasing costs are going to be significantly lower, I would think, than the actual purchase, although I haven't purchased a trailer in God knows how long. But it does take time. I think the problem you run into if you have them set someplace and are planning to move them around, they need to move them. They have to come in and make arrangements to move them, and that is the mobilization aspect that they got to move them, they got to hook electricity up, they got to tie them down. As Nate said, they got to build decks, and sometimes that just takes time.
And that's why it bears a broader discussion on what during the redistricting discussion, there were a multitude of options that were presented by community members on, there are any number of companies that are willing to put those out. It's a competitive market, it appears to me. It comes down to our preparedness to get a trailer, whether it's leased or owned. The discussion last time was how prepared are we to put it on a footprint and service it. And I think we can discuss putting that in play as an overflow option without having to commit to owning the trailer, whether we own or lease, having that preparedness to do it at need. I think that's a good way to develop, as you speak to, swing space or overflow or whatever we need it for. But
So,
I'm sorry, that's not on agenda.
no, it's okay. But back to the agenda. I think while that is absolutely something we should consider, the goal tonight was to boil some of these options out. And I think through our conversations, we have done so, but I think that to be fair to Mr. Osborne and what he is asking for, we need to, if there are options, we are ready to blow off this list. We need to do that. That's our job. So would you prefer to go option by option, yes or no vote from each person, and blow it off that way? Or would you prefer to go person at a time and tell me your top three?
How about anybody wants to blow off option one? And see how many people want to blow it off. And how many
Okay.
people want to blow off two.
So go one at a time? Okay,
Well, that does come to consideration if you eliminate, any one of us might have a preference on choice. If you eliminate our preferred choice, then you're going to have a second one, which lends to your argument for the other way of doing it, saying, I would like option this, then this, then this. I think that's a more salient way to do it in case your option doesn't carry with the board, you
can
still have a
choose to keep
second.
more than one option on there. You don't have to just stick with one.
right. It's just to, that's kind of, I may have been confusing and I apologize. That's kind of what I was going for. Is there, if we get around the circle and there's no appetite for option 5, I know that's not
Mhm.
real, then it's gone. And we're done talking about it and we're giving a sense of direction. And if we go around the table and 4 of us are like, no, then it's not gone, but in that
Okay.
same breath,
I understand.
it
Yeah.
gives more of
Yeah, that
guidance.
seems fair.
Okay, so let's start with option 1. So what you are doing is giving me, I am going to ask, would you like to keep option 1 on as an option? It is a simple yes or no. Mr. Beard?
Yes, keep it.
Yes. Director Gelazella?
Yes.
Director Gelsinger?
Yes, and I'm gonna make it easy. That's the only one on the table for me, so you don't have to ask me anymore.
We should still go around.
Respectfully, I appreciate that. Director Bauer?
Yes.
Director Smith?
Number one and only.
Director Brennan?
Number one and only as well.
Okay, I'll ask myself. Yes for option 1.
Make sure I have the numbers, sorry.
Option 2, Director Beard?
I would delete that for further consideration.
Thank you, sir. Director Galazzella.
Delete option 2.
Delete it just so everybody at home can hear me.
Sorry.
Delete.
Okay. I am also delete.
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 Okay, so option 2 is no longer in consideration for the district. Option 3,
I have next on it.
Director Beard.
I would delete that as well.
Yes, sir. Director Galazzella.
May I clarify that's
Absolutely.
option 3 and 3B, both of those I would delete.
We're doing them one at a
Oh,
time.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's jumping the gun if we indicate where we're going to go elsewhere. It guides the vote. So I'm going to keep option 3.
We're going to keep option 3, okay?
Delete.
What did you say? sir?
Delete.
Delete, sorry.
Delete.
Delete,
Delete.
Delete.
delete. Okay, option 3B. Director Beard, you said delete. Are you
Correct.
sticking with that?
Delete.
Yes, sir.
Keep.
Keep.
Delete.
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 I am also delete. Option 4. Director Beard,
Keep it.
okay?
Keep.
Delete.
Keep.
Director Smith,
Delete.
Delete.
I will keep it for now for the consideration. So I believe we have narrowed it down to option 1 or option 4. Is everybody, that's what everybody wanted. Okay, we're going to move on. Additions, deletions, and modifications
So,
to, ooh,
Can I just ask, before we move on, is there anything that I need to do for the board to advance the consideration of this? I'll put out there that I am off at the PASBO conference all of next week for the most part. So if there's something I need to be working on to aid this discussion, I'll need it this week so I can.
so from what I've heard, just to synthesize to the best of my abilities, and of course, jump in. I think the greatest consideration when people want to leave for is the overcrowding in the middle school. We've heard, of course, that there are potential schedule changes coming. There's really no way to know what that looks like until they're introduced to us. It was mentioned that we're regaining a couple classrooms, physical space. So I think it would be beneficial to have an idea, what is that physical space? Is that going to be a traditional classroom? Is it going to be dedicated to special education? Can it hold 25 kids? Can it only hold 8? Is it a closet? Things like that, I think are very beneficial to the decision because our 5th grade class, to Director Galazella's point, is currently the last bubble class. Most of the numbers coming up are 26, 24, 25, 27. We may lose some to Lincoln Edge or whatever Lincoln Edge becomes, but we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. We know that classrooms are tight right now. So if we can look at what space we might be gaining and a plan for the schedule moving forward, I think those two things combined might help with people's decision between the two if they're considering both of them. And I think the other piece that I heard was repeated was, bare bones Park Hill project. And I don't want to say that like we're doing the bare minimum because we're not. This building needs to be good for these kids, but we need to know what is the cost to improve the facility and what is the cost for aesthetics? Because from what I've heard, the aesthetics are not going to take precedence to the functionality of the building. While the high school will undoubtedly be beautiful, I believe there is a lot of aesthetic cost to that, that we are not in a financial position as a district right now to consider for a Park Hills project. So that is my synthesis of what was said this evening. Would anyone like to agree, disagree, add on?
I agree.
I agree as well. And just to add a little bit to that is if you could, like you did today in the meeting, if you could send to us all the aging elements of Park Hill so we get a more complete understanding, I think that would really help to that regard.
So I will definitely work on that aspect of the Park Hills of it. The option 4 sounds a lot like that's more of a building administrative conversation, and I will tap that side of the aisle to
Awesome.
chime in on that as appropriate.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, number 8, additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda. Do you have any this evening, sir? Okay, Moving on, hearing of persons who wish to address the board. Is there anyone in the audience tonight that would like to address the board in reference to an agenda-based item? Yes, yep, come on up. Please state your name and your township for the record.
Sylvia Shoemaker, West Manheim. I appreciate the discussion on this feasibility study. We've gone into projects in the past. I mean, this high school renovation, we didn't need to build a Taj Mahal. We didn't need to spend $1 million on raising a roof. The middle school was renovated not that long ago and it's overcrowded. I mean, I know that was a prior board, but was there not a feasibility study done at that time? Are we scheduling that different than we did then, that we didn't foresee this? So I appreciate you all having a lot of discussion on this because our numbers are not good. You know, we need to look out for the students, but we also need to look out to the taxpayers. So we don't need to be building Taj Mahals. Let's just be frugal. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. Matters for which board action is required, Personnel Committee, Mr. Smith.
I'm making a motion to approve the entirety of 10A.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Smith and a second from Mr. Gelsinger.
This is all pretty standard, except if we turn to number 3, we will see Mr. Doug Furman on there as his contract for a new business administrator, since Mr. Mummert is retiring after many decades. So that is exciting.
It's just two.
I'm not that
decades.
old. Jeez.
Wonderful. Any comments?
Yeah, I just want to, again, thank Jeff for the years of service and making things clear for the board. That's been, I can speak from like, the guidance you give to understanding all this, it's a lot to understand, so I very much appreciate it. And equally, I'm very excited that Mr. Furman is willing to step into those shoes, as big as they may be, and I
My
think
feet aren't that big either.
I think you'll do an excellent job, so thank you for putting in for that.
I was as well gonna mention Doug, so thanks for stepping up, even though there was probably some arm twisting that happened, so I think we all up here appreciate it.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Galzella,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver.
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
I also just wanted to make note, also excited for Mr. Furman. We are, however, losing a full-time classroom aide at EHMMS who has worked for the district for 21 years. So that is very impressive. So sad to see her go, but hopefully she is going to enjoy her retirement just like Mr. Mummert. Okay, moving on to 10B, Student and Community Relations. In Mr. Leidy's absence, I asked Ms. Brennan to take this one this evening.
Thank you. I am making a motion to approve 10B1.
Second.
I have a motion from Mrs. Brennan, a second from Mr. Smith. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Galzella,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver.
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no.
Okay. And I'd also like to make a motion to approve 10B2 and 3.
Second.
Motion from Ms. Brennan, second from Ms. Bauer.
Recommendations to approve, requesting the use of the high school stadium for the football team, for skill work, no fees required, and then also to approve the request from the York Adams Community Tennis Association to use the high school tennis courts. Also, for the junior tennis program, they are a Category C organization, so no fees are required.
Point of clarification.
Oh, so the fees are required, sorry.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Galzella,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver.
Yes.
7 yes, 0 no.
Dr. Burkhart?
Briefly, won't be on tonight's agenda. We got the information too late today, but we are approving this weekend. We have one of our girls wrestlers has made it to States. And she will be traveling, I think it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So I've given the authorization based on board policy that you guys have given that to me. It will be on the next agenda, on the 12th for approval. And then we also have 5 swimmers who have qualified for States. So our wrestler goes with 2 coaches, and then our 5 swimmers are also going with 2 coaches. And they are the following 13th, 14th, and 15th. So that Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So you'll see those on the next agenda. The wrestler will be retroactive, and then the swimmer will be proactive, swimmers. So we're excited about that.
Excellent.
They didn't tell me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe the wrestler was a freshman, female freshman, Gobrick?
Claire?
I
Claire-
believe
Claire
I saw they
Gobrick. That
posted that
makes
on the
sense.
wrestling page. So very cool. Very, very cool. I don't know the swimmers, but we'll get their names because theirs will be
Yes.
forward.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, this brings us to 11, Program Committee, Mr. Beard.
All right, so I make a motion that we open discussion on the enrollment, item 11.1.
I need a second.
Second.
Okay, motion for Mr. Beard, second for Mr. Gelsinger.
And what I would like to highlight, Dr. Burkhart, you mentioned that, we've got some bubble classrooms, some larger classes, and both the information that you had previously presented to the board, as well as what Crabtree Rohrball is presenting to us, is that sometime in the future, our enrollment might drop off. And just looking at the numbers, 6th through 8th grade, all well over 300 per class. 2nd grade through 5th grade at our elementary schools, well over 300 per class. However, our current 1st grade is 283, our current kindergarten 304. So I wonder whether the low numbers we're seeing for kindergarten registration so far, as well as our current kindergarten and 1st grade class, is that the beginning of this smaller class size?
Yeah. It's a great question. I don't know.
Right.
Our guess is that it is the beginning. I don't think we're going to shrink to 200 or, because obviously just the sheer size of our district, population density wise, I think we're always going to be in that neighborhood. I just don't know if we're going to be in the upper 3s. I do know that for an area to be growing, I think it's supposed to be 2.75 people per household. And I think we're about 2.6. At least we were last time I think we looked at it. So for that reason, it does tend to suggest that we are going to see a little bit of a backslide. But there again, 3 years from now, there could be a growth. So it all depends. If I know that Mr. Osborne and I had this discussion today, he is very attuned to the housing industry. That seems to be slowing down. Houses I did see are not selling as quickly as they were. So even your existing houses are down. So not a lot of movement. Who knows why that's happening? That doesn't necessarily mean it's unique or that's happening here, but we do seem to trend with what we see across the country, especially across the Commonwealth. So if I had to guess, my guess is we're going to see a little bit of a smaller class size working up through. And then 3-4 years from now, we might see a bump up again. But we talked about this. We said, actually, Mr. Furman and I talked about it. When you saw the average price of a townhouse at $316,000, my daughter and her fiance have really good jobs. They cannot afford a $316,000 townhouse. So, and then you add a child into that. So I think there's a lot of pressures at play that are going to keep families small for if not the immediate future, even a little bit forward. But I do think we'll see a little bit of a backslide.
Mr. Beard, I was having this conversation with one of our administrators. I think another thing that really plays into this area being really hard to figure out is that we are so close to the Maryland line. And when you look at birth rates that go by York County, a lot of our families are actually having their babies down in Maryland, because when your employee is in Maryland and your insurance is in Maryland, it's more beneficial. So while it's there's no crystal ball for that, right? Because and I'm the perfect example, all 4 of my children were born in Maryland. All have Maryland birth certificates. None of them would have been counted for the York County birth rates. So it's a very interesting, truly guessing game to figure out, were you born in York County and you moved out? Were you born in Carroll County or Baltimore County down at Sinai or Hopkins? And then you're up here in Pennsylvania because it's a straight shot down 83. So I don't know how anyone would be able to figure that out, but I do agree with what Dr. Burkhart just said, and I think we are at the beginning of seeing a bit of a slowdown. And I think there's just so many factors to that. I also was shocked at the price of a townhome. Certainly with my 4 kids, we wouldn't even fit in a townhome, but we never would have been able to afford it when they were that little. So it's a very interesting, strange time. And unfortunately, I feel like that leaves us with guessing with our eyes closed a little bit, unfortunately, which is really not the way anyone wants to lead.
With that, I suppose we can move on.
Okay. Thank you very much for bringing that up. Okay.
I will say that if we get, I apologize, I just thought of this, as we get updates on kindergarten, obviously we'll share that with you.
Buildings, grounds, and equipment. Mr. Plessick is not here tonight. However, he usually immediately just turns to Mr. Osborne. So I will do that turn this evening. Mr. Osborne, please take it away.
So as a custom, we'll start with the schedule updates. I feel at this point in the game, the contractors have been making good headway. Things were a little tough there in January, rolling into February with as cold as it was, as far as some of the demo they needed to complete. They tried to withhold from opening up too many holes into the building. But that was a challenge, but I feel now that, they kind of feel like spring's right around the corner. We're finished the demo for most of the front of the building. There's a little bit left, but most of it's torn off and footers are going in and block is coming up as we speak. Their focus on the front of the building, the immediate focus is to get foundations laid and slabs poured at the new auditorium lobby so that we have safe access for our spring performance season. So they're focused on getting that together over the course of the next week or so. So we have safe access to that auditorium again. Meanwhile, they will continue building the foundation across the rest of the front of the building and continue bringing that up. On the east side of the building, most of the underground, when I checked on it this morning, was nearing completion for the new kitchen area, meaning, the trenches are dug, the pipes were laid, being backfilled and being inspected. Once they get the final inspection, all that underground piping for the kitchen system, they'll be able to backfill that and make moves to get that slab poured in the next few weeks. Again, once that happens, then walls start going up and we start closing things back in again, which is always the direction we want to see things progress. And they've also been able to make good headway on a number of classrooms within the building. Still working on that goal of trying to have 90% of the classroom spaces renovated before this summer session even starts to help lighten that load. Because once it comes time to raise that cafeteria ceiling and build a new administrative suite across the front of the building, plus the auditorium, plus the music suite, it's a heck of a summer coming at them. So I applaud them for pushing the schedule forward in advance of what was originally laid out, because I think they're going to need every bit of it. Any scheduling questions or concerns? So we'll keep working
Just
on
gonna
that.
Pray for beautiful weather all spring.
Absolutely. We're spending a lot of time right now kind of working on that coordination of this late spring and into summer scheduling, as far as district being able to turn over spaces such as that cafeteria, such as the underside of the gymnasium and the gym. What's appropriate, what can we accommodate to allow them to move forward and not adversely affect our educational classes too much. So we're working through all that right now. It's a lot of moving parts, but I am very thankful for teams at the high school have been very doing a very good job to sit down and talk through the challenges with us. So that we have opportunity to try to jump those hurdles and get everybody to where they need to be. So it's been a big team effort over there. Payment applications, you will see a handout in each of your spaces. These are pretty much our typical payment applications on a monthly basis. Kind of the oddballs on there, Cumberland Analytical and First Capital. We did remove another section of exterior window glazing that had tested positive for ACM, so that's the monitoring and contractor removal of those windows. And the rest of them, I think, are pretty standard fare that the board's used to seeing. So those will be on next agenda for approval.
Any questions about those? Okay,
Change orders, I will be adding to the agenda if the board so approves. There's a request for a clean agent fire suppression system change order. Our new MDF room, our main computer distribution. What's MDF officially stand for? Main
distribution.
That computer room has a clean agent suppression, rather than spraying water on it, should there be a fire, as a clean agent. There was some incontinuity between the architect's drawings and the mechanical drawings. One showed a ceiling, the other one did not show a ceiling. Clean agent is based on volume of the space. With the ceiling not being in, which it is not in, changes the volume of that space. It needed to be bigger. Implemented a $10,000 change request order from the fire suppression system contractor because the space is increased in volume. And then there's also a small, roughly $1,000 request from the general contractor because along with that, the door also needs to be a ceiling door where it has a sealed framework around it, a ceiling sill, moving components. It kind of makes it more like a submarine door almost than just a standard door. Those were not consistent amongst the drawings. So that's a request from our contractors to get that room resolved. So I will add that to our next agenda if there's no opposition to that for approval. Moving on, I did reach out to Mr. Plessick and Mrs. Weaver about a change order that authorized the contractors to move forward on a T&M basis. The washer dryer rough-in the family consumer science was missed on the plumbing drawings. Electrical drawings showed it, the mechanical drawings showed it. The plumbing drawings did not have the supply lines or the drain lines. They were preparing to pour the floor in that area. So time was of the essence. We didn't want them to pour the new floor with the drain lines not being under it. So I did authorize it on a time and material basis with the guarantee that it would definitely not go over the $10,000 threshold that was previously established. So once I get that ticket and approve the time that they set on it and the materials used, the board will see that formal change order for approval. But I want to let the board know that we did take action to move them forward with that because the expediency kind of required it. The other change order I've requested from the contractors to get numbers on and something we need to resolve. We reused our well fume collection system from the metal shop. That system we installed probably 8 years ago. It was in fine shape. There was nothing wrong with it. We opted to reuse that system in the new shops. The drawings called for it to be reused, but the airlines that clean those filters on that system were not included in the drawings. We're having to have the plumbing contractor go back and add airline taps to make those well fume filters function correctly. Should not be a major issue, but it is a cost incurred that was overlooked in the design process. So that's all I would have on the high school unless there's other questions.
any other questions in reference to the high school for Mr. Osborne? Okay,
So under other, I do have 2 items. The quick note one is here at the middle school, we did suffer some wind uplift and a piece of the roof in the corner did pull out from the edge metal coping. We had the roofers out. They have ballasted. They've temporarily fastened it back down, and it is a wind warranty claim that's going back to the manufacturer. The guys are out here in the field to address it for us. Didn't see that there was any reason that it should be anything other than a wind warranty claim. He gave me no calls for alarm there, but just wanted to make the board aware that one of the high corners, that when you stand on that corner and look west, you see all the way to the mountains. It's a long way across there. So when the wind was blowing the other week, it got under that edge through that metal and pulled the roofing out from under the metal. So that's in action at this point. And again, hopefully it should all be covered through warranty process. That'd be our expectations. And then the final one, we've talked about a little bit in the past, but at your space, I've provided a kind of a quick memo sheet as far as traffic control devices at our entrances to our buildings. Our buildings operate very similar. While the physical attributes are a little bit different, it's pretty much the same process in almost all of them. The elementaries, all of our buildings, we have a bus drop-off pickup line, and then the parent pickup drop-off line is separated. When the buses are lined up, what we looked at is that the buses give a very good screen from the roadside as far as our children and errant traffic. But if somebody would choose to jump the curb and come down the sidewalk, we would be extreme risk. And in order to mitigate that, what you see in front of you is two products that I think are a quick, easy solution that helps mitigate and lower that danger. The pedestal that you see at the bottom is a 16-inch by 16-inch by 28-inch, I believe, high cube. I don't have my paper here in front of me. Weighs a couple 100 pounds, 616 pounds, and it can be epoxy and fastened down to the concrete with metal rods. We feel that would be a formidable thing for the average vehicle try to maneuver over or around. So we would propose that we place one of those at each end of where the buses line up when they're dropping off the kids or picking up the kids to kind of cause a roadblock obstacle so somebody couldn't come down the sidewalk. The concrete bench, again, weighs 920 pounds. And I would propose that would be our second tier of defense, that I would recommend that we entertain placing probably 2 benches at the main entrances then. So when the buses are not there dropping off kids and the normal school days in session, and you have casual foot traffic in and out of the building, and most of our building entrances are glass storefront, so there's nothing majorly structural about them. 2 well-placed benches at each of our main entrances, I think, would also pose another obstacle hazard for a vehicle that would prevent them from having free rein on crashing into our main glass entrances. So that would be my recommendation as far as mitigating some of our exposure on the front of our buildings. I think I would recommend we do the same type aspect at our parent drop-off lines too, because there you have, in some cases, in this building, 100+ cars all lined up waiting for students coming out of the building, that if you had a bad actor in that line, I think there would be benefit of having a concrete bench or pilaster strategically located that would shield our entrance and exit of our students.
So point of information, how many total?
Let me get to my right page here. Take you back. So I would propose that at West Manheim, Bearsville, and the middle school would be my recommendation for where we would start this process. I would propose 4 of the benches and 4 of the pedestals in each of those buildings, with 2 for the 2 benches at the bus line, 2 pedestals at the bus line, and 2 benches at the parent drop-off line, and 2 pedestals at the parent drop-off line. That would give us a budget figure somewhere in the $23,000 to $25,000 price range. And it'd be an expenditure I propose we could pull from the capital reserve fund.
what is the goal of these devices? Are we trying to prevent accidental things from happening? Or are we trying to prevent the terrorists from driving through our doors? Because I can tell you, these benches are not gonna stop somebody that's intending to come in there.
There is always a way to defeat everything in my mind.
But how much
I
money
think
are,
it discourages, I think it discourages it. Like I said, I think you can defeat anything we put in the way. I think 1,000-pound concrete bench is going to stop most cars, within reason.
I think somebody's coming in with a purposeful mission is gonna drive right around it. I just,
And that is always a possibility, but we're trying to give the ability for some shelters, some obstacles, some way to slow that progression down.
So to that point, Nate and I went to a couple elementary schools and talked about this extensively. And when those buses are lined up, the pedestals, putting them at the ends will absolutely prevent someone from popping that curb and going down when kids are exiting or entering the building at drop off and pick up. The pedestal is a very effective way to stop any vehicular box truck bad actor, which is typically where terrorists go, is they rent box trucks. And to your point, the concrete benches, I do see that they're low. Initially, I saw that and I was concerned. Do we know the height on those?
You know, the average seating height is 16 to 18 inches. I think that's yours.
Okay. And we do have to maintain a bench functionality, especially in elementary schools. We can't go too high, but someone with speed, the point in a safety control device is to limit the velocity. So any vehicle, whether it's 4x4 box truck, hitting one of these concrete benches will destroy the built-up velocity. I had particular concerns with one or two of our elementary schools. When you pull in, you have a straight line of sight, you can go right down the sidewalk. From this, you can build up velocity and go straight down. And these would absolutely protect from that, especially the bollard part. But the benches is the secondary, to Nate's point, is if you pop the curb and when there aren't buses, that stops entry into the building with a vehicle. I've seen that personally, and I'll tell you, I can't advocate strongly enough for having something that scared kids or teachers when they see a vehicle coming can get behind. That is huge. So we're talking the lives of a kid, and I think this expense is a great way to protect. We all saw what happened in New Orleans, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. Terrorism is going to continue, and spending a little money on some concrete to protect the kids standing on the sidewalk, I think that is a warranted expense.
that's why I wanted clarification of what the intent was, because a 16-inch block is not gonna stop a jacked up truck from driving over top of it. And slowing down the velocity of the truck before it impacts a building does not lessen the impact of the explosion if there is a device on the truck. So if we're trying to prevent somebody from having a heart attack and driving into a building, I can agree with this type of a device. If you're trying to stop a terrorist from blowing up the front of our school, I do not believe this device is going to do anything of that nature. I just want to make it very clear.
So the benches are a secondary measure, and typically in any terrorist, the training I've gotten, the terrorist is they drive over as many as they can, they get out, and then they shoot until they're out of ammo, and then they stab till they're taken down. And I hate to even discuss that in the nature of schooling here, but that's the reality. So bomb is not that MO, so we're preventing the run over portion of that attack. And that's the point of these concrete barriers, is the vehicular attack. And not as much, to your point, I agree. Explosive wise, we're not doing much, but
We just got done discussing extreme deficits on budgets. I just don't believe we need concrete benches to prevent a car from driving in our school. I'll just leave it at that. You're not gonna convince me otherwise, not for the amount of money we're looking to spend.
Mr. Osborne and Mr. Mummert, for my own personal edification, obviously, putting anything at an elementary school that looks like a parkour ramp could potentially also come with risks of children hurting themselves during school and or after school. What is the district's liability if a skateboarder comes down to Park Hills at nighttime and starts ramping off of these things? Just from a different aspect.
Well, if we have signage that says don't skateboard, then there's no liability on us.
Okay.
They're doing that.
I figured it was something, but I didn't know because it's technically taxpayer money pays for all these buildings. So someone could make the argument that they can be there anytime they want to be there.
We are protected by the tort claims law, which pretty much says that if someone gets injured on our property, unless we were aware of the deficiency, like if there's a 3-foot hole out here in our sidewalk, but we don't know about, someone steps in and breaks their ankle. If we don't know about it, we're not liable. If we know about it and didn't take steps to fix it, and someone steps in and breaks their ankle, then we're on the hook, and our insurance has to pay it. So that's basically the easiest way to explain it.
So, and then for clarification, the benches are 16 inches high. Our buildings do carry signs that say no skateboarding.
Mhm.
And that is a concern. I think the board would have to anticipate that we put an object in the sidewalk, whether it's the baluster, pedestal, or a bench. Somebody somewhere is gonna be not paying attention and run their bike into it, stub their toe, try to jump over it. You know, whether there's liability or not, it's gonna happen, and we'll hear about one way or another.
Right, and to that point, we already have concrete sidewalks, so the fall injury is already there with the sidewalk, right? Mr. Gelsinger, to your point, the bollards are absolutely more effective at stopping traffic than a bench. So if we want to incur cost savings, there's a $320 difference between bollards and benches here. So even if we were to replace the plan of concrete benches in front of our buildings and have 2 bollards, I can tell you, our teachers line up our students, especially at the elementary level, when they exit the building anyway. Having bollards to line up on would be a practical advantage that also serves as a defense. Again, having worked in Pikesville, I saw a number of elderly accidents where they used the wrong pedal and went through the front of a grocery store.
I support them for that purpose. I
Yes.
just want to make it very clear. For
Yes.
that purpose, I can support these devices.
And so,
If the intention was for anything else, I do not support it.
so that's where, while we can debate the benches, I think the bollards are indisputably effective. So.
So you're looking for directive as to whether or not we'd like you to show us where they would be on pictures and assign that to a cost?
Correct, exactly. That's what the directive I need. Is the board all right with the proposed approach of just those 4 buildings initially with the mindset? The high school will have some bollards built into the project. There are bollards in it, and I think it would be appropriate to wait and let that project play out before we decide whether we need to enhance it or not. And then with Park Hills, in my mind, it's up in the air, but in my mind, again, I would propose it should be the next on a renovation project. So why would we drop, a couple $1,000s worth of pedestals on the sidewalks that are inherently going to be in the way, possibly damaged, or not even be relevant to the project said and done? So that would be
Well, you went West Manheim, Bearsville, right?
correct. And then, if the board would rather we just go toward the pedestal bollard type, that's absolutely fine. Be, happy to hear that directive. And then, I'd absolutely would recommend that I bring back a site plan for each of those 4 buildings where we propose to drop them, and, a little more exact pricing on these.
Point of information, I would also like to understand what the timeline is. Like, where does this, from the point of ordering, are they shipped? How does that
All of
process
these
work?
I've been looking at this point, say they're on a custom build cycle of 4 to 6 week lead time.
Awesome.
And then depending on how many we decide, where the price point goes, we'll decide what type of procurement action I'll have to take.
Correct. Quote your bids. No.
Once we get up into that $25,000 range, we start looking at prevailing wages and public bids. If we can find a way to keep it down around the 22, I think 22.8 is the cutoff point, and I could just bring back 3 proposals for the board to evaluate and choose amongst.
And charging it to the capital reserve fund doesn't impact the general fund budget, and it can be done on either fiscal year. There's funding in there already, so
So,
and it's fixed to it's a fixed thing, so we can charge the capital reserve fund. I think that's the appropriate place to take the funds from.
and all be realistic, I think that the nuts and bolts of it, it turns into a summer project at this point in the game until we get through this process.
So just thinking through our buildings, I've spent the majority of my children's school career at Mannheim. Thinking to what Mr. Gelsinger was saying in reference to accidental versus purposeful. Mannheim has tiered parking on both their teacher and visitor parking. The odds, I think, at that school of someone being able to do what God forbid, would almost be impossible. Because the parent drop-off line doesn't lead to a sidewalk at all. It leads to 2 giant dumpsters. So you'd have to push 2 giant dumpsters before you even made it towards the door. And then for the other sidewalk, the build out of Mannheim's walkway has posts just to hold it. So you would be going through 7 or 8 of those before you could even remotely get to turn to go to the front door. Park Hills, West Mannheim, straight shot, I can picture it. But Mannheim, I mean, you'd have to
try.
ramp a parking lot. I've seen people go into the water detention when they've run off the road. But I've never, I mean, I'm not trying to downplay the
No, I get what you're
severity.
saying.
Just from a logistical standpoint, I feel like that school, whoever designed that parking lot, probably for water issues, designed it in a way that I think would make it very difficult to accidentally or purposefully create this type of a situation. Now, if we're doing it from a continuity standpoint of making sure all of our elementary schools have the same thing, I understand that. But if we're looking at areas where it is need-based versus continuity-based for pricing, I would I would like to ask that we just look at Mannheim one more time to see if it would really be something.
And add Park Hills to your point. I mean, it's a study, right?
Yes, sir.
We're conducting
Yep.
a floor
So,
plan.
and that's
or
why I said,
footprint study.
knowing seeing where they would go,
Mhm.
and what potentially could be positioned, and then being able to remove pieces if we decide, no, this is not cost effective, or this is not the direction the board wants. I think would be beneficial, because I do think that, like you said, at our high school, it's already part of it, so that's great. But just, really seeing it from a visual standpoint.
Sure. So I'll work on the floor plans then, or the site plans for those, and we can apply some dimensions to those to help visualize what kind of drive lanes there may or may not be.
Right.
And,
Thank
and,
you.
and lastly, to the point of the Bolliard, do they have a rounded top, to the Bolliard? Do they have an option for that?
I don't know that they do on the square.
I mean, to the
pedestal
point, kids climbing and jumping off, if it's rounded, they're less likely to.
bollard. It seemed like kind of the smaller diameter rounded ones did have a round top, but in my mind, that square
Okay,
big chunk that
Yeah.
if you knock that thing over and
Don't
got
wanna lose
underneath your
mass.
car,
right.
I see that very hard to get off of, harder than getting off a round one. Was my
Okay.
rationale for
I got you.
picking that one. I mean, if we would prefer, we can look at round ones, but
I'd like to consider both.
just
if
a column.
we're looking. Yeah.
It's not that big a difference either
Okay.
way from my end.
Okay.
So I got,
That's it. So this brings us to number 13, which is 13A is a discussion on the comprehensive plan proposed draft 2025 through 2028. Dr. Friel.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Just a couple of things I want to comment on, and then I'm happy to have you ask whatever questions you want to ask about the comprehensive plan. It has come to my attention that one of the things about the comprehensive plan is that it is very much a state-run document. So a lot of the things that we've given to you are, there's just a lot of pieces to it. It's a lot of things to wade through. We are on target for next Wednesday to bring updated version to you. We'll talk about it again. The vote, as we know, I've said it multiple times now, it's at the end of this month. One of the things that we have traditionally done is create an executive summary. Now, I have just the visual copy for you. We're still working on it. I just wanted to show you a little visual of what the cover's starting to look like. We had a couple of edits to still work out. We will get that, and I cannot take credit for this. This was done by Ms. Kaufman and Ms. Krill, who are much better at this than I think anyone on the administrative team as far as the look of things. But why I'm bringing this up is because I do feel like this will put succinctly what the comprehensive plan is really about. The 5 goals, what we're really focusing on, how we want to accomplish it over the next several weeks. So if you'll permit, unless you have something pressing, one more week to kind of hold back on major questions about it, unless you really say, this is not the right direction to go. This is the time to say, this is not the right direction to go, because then we have a boatload of work to do in the next 3 weeks. So if I'm okay with that, we can hold off on any further discussion until next Wednesday, if that's all right, once I give you the executive summary document.
Would anyone like to tell Dr. Friel that this is not the right direction to go? I do not want to tell Dr. Friel that. So if any of you would like to, you
Jeff,
go.
you don't get voted.
You go right ahead. No,
Lame
Mr.
duck.
Mummert, no. No, thank you.
All right.
So I think one of the benefits, as you said, is, anytime you walk into a realm that you don't eat, sleep, and breathe, right? I work in the corporate world. I don't work in the education sector. I constantly find myself saying, well, and we wouldn't do this way. But that doesn't mean you don't do it this way. So I think, saying, hey, I understand this might be hard to synthesize when it looks like this. We're going to present something that will be easily digestible in a way that, regardless of your occupation, you can understand it is very beneficial, and also
Sure.
will be to the community,
Right.
because many community members have been part of this. They've done surveys, they've attended parts of the bits and pieces of the committees, and I think it will be very nice to be able to present to them, this is what your work has created.
Right.
And so, thank you.
Sure. And as I've said multiple times, the thing about this plan is that we're trying to simplify it into systems that are already working within the district, of just refining them. So I think the executive summary will help show that.
Thank you. Okay. 13B is a discussion on the 2025-2026 budget.
So as Dr. Burkhardt indicated, the administration is currently working on developing some proposed budget cuts to bring back to the school board at the meeting on Monday. We don't have them completed at this point in time, but we're working on them, which I think will be helpful in our process. Also, as Mr. Beard has indicated, he did ask for another option for us to model as far as not including debt service for either Park Hills or West Manheim in our 5-year plan. So Doug will work on developing those. We can have those prepared for Monday as well. At this point, if there's any additional information you'd like us to prepare for Monday, we'd be all ears and happy to take those requests. If there's any general discussion, if you have any general questions, we're open to those as well.
And just as a reminder, since we are live, there will be a committee of the whole meeting held on Monday evening with an emphasis on finance, and that begins
Specifically
at
the budget.
6:30 here in this boardroom. It was announced publicly, but it was a bit of a tight turnaround, so just to make sure that it also made it onto tonight's agenda for announcement.
6:30, right? And it's been advertised. We're good.
Yep. Does anyone have anything they'd like to speak on for the budget this evening before we meet on Monday? Okay, then we will move forward with seeing each other again on Monday. This brings us to number 14.
Actually, I have one thing
Oh,
for Heather,
I'm sorry, sir.
if we can go back.
Yep,
Because there really wasn't anywhere to plug it in. I'd like the board to consider guidance for the facilities director. Now that 7-Eleven has been passed, completed, approved, we need to give direction to him to go forward with removing the signage from the bathrooms in the middle school and high school and making sure they are compliant with our current policy that is now in effect, as well as return the visibility back to the way it was intended to be done during the initial renovation plan, now that the facilities have been finished and provide privacy from floor to ceiling. So I feel, just for transparent purposes, that I think this board needs to give guidance to the facilities director to complete those things.
I'll second that. Our policy very clearly outlines our definition of sex as male and female, so having a sign saying gender inclusive needs to come down per our policy. And as far as the opening, we have a multitude of buildings that you can view the wash area, the hand washing area. Those stalls are completely privatized. So again, having a space where kids can meet without overview is a bad idea. So I'm for that as well.
Point of information, I would like to ask for some clarification or directive, I guess, as a follow-up as far as ILC is concerned.
Yep, I can make a call to the ILC tomorrow. In past conversation, waiting for 7-Eleven to pass, it was communicated to me through Attorney Samick that any additional changes could not occur when students were in the building once it passed, and could not take the bathroom down for any length of time during students' ability to use it as per the policy. Because if we take the bathroom down, then they don't have the bathroom to use. That was what he explained to me. But obviously now the policy is passed, so I can touch base with him tomorrow and ask what their suggestion would be now that the policy has passed. I have not spoken to them since it passed last week. So, and then, I mean, I don't have a suggestion just because same as Ms. Bauer, I don't want to speak for the person that would have to defend us if we did something out of step.
Yeah, if you could clarify that, that would be great, because, I mean, it turned out wonderful. I don't see there any reason to be a piece of Lawan with 2 screws on the thing that kids could bust through it right now. It's that flimsy.
I will make
It would
that
make a
call tomorrow.
lot more sense to not have the goofy signs there or the Lawan that's not even plywood.
For my,
Just-
oh,
Just
Mr.
for clarification, Mr. Osborne, how long would it take you to replace the signage and to remove the plywood?
4 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, that's fine.
Now, I would like to add, I had very clear discussion with Mr. Samick of the ILC regarding both those issues, and he very clearly indicated once we passed 7-Eleven, we could open those windows and they would defend it, and we could take those signages down. So I've gotten personally from him, we can do so already. So I don't see the need to delay.
I have as well spoken to him. I will not disclose because I consider it legal advice. If we want to go into executive session, we can do that. But I feel it's this board's responsibility to give guidance and not pass the buck on to anybody else. That way, we're not in the news for doing something secretly.
At this point, I need guidance from everybody because we have obviously differing points of view, which is our job to come to some conclusion. So if I'm understanding correctly, we're going to either say, move forward with, I'll say editing, the final edits to the bathroom. Is that correct? Would that
So because not everybody here has received the same guidance from ILC, I would support, as the president, reach out to him, ask for guidance from him. And that way we can put it on the next agenda to actually vote on it as an item on the agenda. That way it's definitely public and everybody knows it was on the agenda ahead of time.
Okay.
But I would just like the board to be prepared to answer questions if anybody wants to reach out to ILC personally, or if we want to try to reach out to them to have them come here to give us some legal advice in executive session. Maybe that's something you can arrange.
I would agree to reach out to ILC first.
Okay. Mr. Smith? Okay. Ms. Bauer? Suggested it. Yep.
Previously stated.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not opposed to double checking with ILC, and if Mr. Osborne or anyone else needs any assistance with those last changes or modifications, I'd be happy to help out anytime.
I have a screwdriver in my truck right now.
So
And lastly, it should come as no surprise. I'm the outlier here on the board. We have a policy and we're in violation of it. To my mind, we should be doing it immediately, but to the board's will, we can do that, but any delay is a violation of our own policy. So any incidents resolving from that will fall on this board for not instituting its own policy.
Understood. Because I don't know the answer to this, what is this, the current signage you said says gender
Inclusive.
inclusive? What is the signage that you believe should be on the restroom or was agreed upon would be?
Male, female, or restroom.
Male, female, or restroom? Okay, I just want to make sure I'm saying the correct things to him.
The way I understand, those will be single-user restrooms, so restroom.
Restroom, okay.
So,
So it is, to be fair, it is 9:35. I am not calling him this evening. I will reach out to him in the morning. And then, first thing, and then that would give us time to get it on the agenda for Monday, because we have plenty of time for it to be on the agenda for the committee of the whole with a finance focus.
so then as far as further clarification for myself, what was done was we had the typical men's restroom, women's restroom, and we added gender inclusive underneath it.
Okay,
So to the 4 minute standard, I can remove gender inclusive and it just becomes a men's room, women's room. If you want me to relabel it as just restroom, I think that's a generic sign. It's easy to come by, but that's probably more than a 4 minute. I gotta get one of those if that's the
Fair.
board's design.
I personally think you could remove the gender inclusive from the signs that are currently there. That would actually meet the policy as it currently is. And then we can hold off on till Monday to actually make the visibility the way it was intended to be done now that the privacy has been created.
And the best end result, of course, is by our policy, it should be labeled restroom. So
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, because it's considered neutral space
Correct.
per the 7-Eleven policy. It's not actually a single-user bathroom, it's neutral. It's
So
a
what
neutral
Mr.
bathroom.
Gelsinger is suggesting until said time as we can
Right, so
get the
rest-
restroom
just
sign, we
restroom.
would remove.
Okay, okay. So I will make sure that I have that conversation with him tomorrow, and then I will update. And if he wants to come speak in executive session, of course, he's always welcome, or Attorney Wenger. Okay.
I just have a question. So I understand the direction of the board and the policy. My question is, when they call, and they will, who am I directing them to?
The board has made a decision.
Okay,
That's
Just I
why-
wanted you
that's
guys all
why
to be-
This is being done in public.
I understand, but there, I will guarantee you, the news agencies will start calling probably tomorrow. So,
So being the one who suffered through that, I'll tell you very directly, that's the president's role to decide how they engage with the media. I consider the media, it was a full court propaganda press, and I would suggest giving them very little to no wiggle room to work your words to their effects.
Well, I don't mind saying that I've already been contacted by the media many times since last Wednesday. My point of view is while I was elected by the majority to sit in this space, I speak only for myself and I choose not to do that because it is very easy for what I say to be taken as we, and I am not we. I am me. And unless I have a conversation with each and every one of you individually and get your opinions, I will never represent this board as a we by myself. So I don't respond. What I say publicly is recorded. What you say publicly is recorded. If they would like to know where I stand, I guarantee you I said it publicly. And that is my stance and will be, because I believe that that is the job of the president to represent the board. And I cannot do that in a one-on-one conversation without having all of you standing here to answer as well. So if any of you have any concerns, that's where I stand.
The only concern I have is we passed a policy. Every person sitting at this table who is a elected board member voted yes to that policy. We need to implement the policy. If you're afraid to implement it because of the backlash of the news media, then you should have questioned your vote whenever we passed the policy. I, for one, stand behind my vote, and this policy needs to be implemented.
And Dr. Burkhardt, I do acknowledge you're going to get phone calls, and it will be another burden for you to bear as a superintendent here. That's unfortunate, but that being said, we don't control the media. That's their behavior, and if they badger you with endless questions, that's their foul play.
I understand. And again, I just, obviously, I'll get calls. I'm sure I will, and I expect that. But I also don't speak for the board, and I don't want to misspeak on your behalf at that point either.
Understood.
That's why I asked that question.
Fair enough.
Dr. Burkhardt, if I could offer a recommendation that I would just simply respond that the discussions, the votes, everything has been done here in public, and if
Direct them.
I simply wouldn't waste my time talking to the media.
And again, and I appreciate that. I just don't want to,
Yeah.
I don't want to misrepresent. That's my point.
Right.
That's why I've asked that
I
question. So I
think
appreciate that.
That would be my recommendation is,
Yeah, I like that.
Everything's
Redirect
been
them to our
collected in
public,
public.
our public meetings.
but thank you for bringing that up, though.
And we apologize ahead of time for what you have to do.
No need to apologize. It's my job.
Mr. Gelsinger, that was the only thing you had, brother?
That's it.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Moving on to visitors. Thank you all for coming. We do have the opportunity to speak. Should anyone that has not spoken want to speak on anything district related? Everybody still in their seats? Okay. So this brings us to the for the good of the order.
I have two quick things.
Fantastic.
Friday, Mrs. Weaver and Miss Brennan and myself had a great time in the middle school. And we did a tour of different special ed classrooms to see how they work and space and nuance and that kind of thing. And it was great. It was a good time. So we're planning on doing it in other buildings as well. And I believe we had a good response from the special ed department that they could see support and things like that. So that was good. And then also several of us tomorrow and the next day are participating in the mock interviews for the 11th grade at the high school. So I look forward to that. It's going to be fun, but I got to go home and get some sleep here shortly. It's dinner.
Anyone else? Just as a note, it is Read Across America Day. Our elementary schools did a fantastic job putting on different things at each of the schools to help champion reading in our K through 5 buildings, which I think is wonderful. To note, Miss Shannon Rash over at Park Hills, I've never gotten the opportunity to work with her with any of my kids, but she is an amazing librarian and she put on a beautiful event for her kids and has for years. So very happy to see that that we are just continuing a love and a fostering for reading in our students. It increases vocabulary, it opens doors for them, it allows them to be humans in society and to better understand the world around them. So very grateful for that. Anyone else? Okay, with that, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. I think the motion was Mr. Smith, Mr. Gelsinger. I think you came in first. Yes, and then Mr. Gelsinger. So everybody just wants to adjourn. Thank you. Meeting adjourned at 9:42.